Okay, so our first presenter will be talking about novel deceleration traffic flow model with oscillatory congested states. And since we have 5 presentations, we want to keep it relatively short. So I'm gonna say 20 minutes, and then ideally we can have some leeway just in case like the presentation goes a little bit longer.
Wait a minute. 怎么会自动播放
？So okay, so we only have around 23 minutes per session. So maybe I'm gonna say maximum 20, but at least from 18 to 20 minutes of a presentation. Does that work? Miss Sue, whenever you're ready, you can start.
I'm ready.
Okay, so please start.
It's clear that team are together with Tiandong and Junxia to prepare for the research. It's my great honor to make a presentation. The subject of the presentation is a novel deceleration traffic flow model with oscillatory congested states. I'd like to divide my presentation into 5 aspects. First, the introduction. Second, the review of Kerner's 3-phase traffic flow theory. And third, model formulation. Fourth, simulation results. And finally is conclusions. Next, we look at the introduction. The main drawback of most exciting cellular commutator models is that all vehicles have no limit to the deceleration capability. The phase transition from free to synchronized follow and from the synchronized follow to wide moving jam is not distinguished. So a novel deceleration traffic flow model that considers oscillatory congested states and slow to start rules is established. I'd like to introduce the review of Kerner's 3-phase traffic flow theory. The 2-phase traffic flow simulated by the NS model is divided into free flow and congested flow. By analyzing field data, Kerner proposed the famous 3-phase traffic flow theory and divided the congested flow into the synchronized flow and wide moving jam. The synchronized flow is defined as its downstream front and the highway bottleneck, and ensures the nuclear nature of traffic breakdown. A wide moving jam is a moving jam that maintains the average velocity of the downstream front of the jam as it propagates, even as it propagates through bottleneck on other device complex traffic states. General pattern and synchronized flow patterns are in the phase diagram. General patterns consist of free flow, synchronized flow, and wide moving jam. When the traffic flow is in the synchronized flow pattern, there are free flow and synchronized flow on the road. As a result of the battle, various types of synchronized flow may occur, such as wide moving, synchronized pattern, local synchronized pattern, and moving synchronized pattern. Next, I'd like to introduce the model formulation. Considering the oscillatory congested states, the novel model introduced an effective desired spacescape in the update rules. Assuming that the driver tends to keep the detective spacescape not smaller than that gap. Otherwise, the driver will be in a defensive state, and the actual behavioral change is characterized by changing deceleration from 1 to 4. The effect of deceleration changing from ordinary deceleration to emergency deceleration is a critical factor in reproducing the transition from free flow to synchronized flow in the null model. The parallel update rules for the null model consist of the following 5 steps. Step 1, the determination of the randomization probability. The probability is linearly interpolated between P and PD when it is less than V slope, and PD is adopted for P when V is greater than V slope. In addition, P is an actual number, and the null model assumes that P is larger than PD. Step 2, determination of the maximal safe velocity. It should be emphasized that for a given vehicle, the safety velocity can take on the value of about 1 to V max at most, and it has multiple values in most cases. In the update rules, the third step introduced the slow to start rules of the TT model and modified them in order to reflect the desire of the driver to drive as fast as possible. The maximum safe velocity is taken and expressed by this one. The gap is the number of empty cells in front of the vehicle. It is important to note that both the step 3 and step 4 involve limited deceleration capacity. The position update is conducted at last. Next, we look at the simulation results. The moderate emergency deceleration in the process of vehicle driving can not only ensure the safety of the vehicle, but also improve the capacity of the road. Therefore, when the emergency deceleration is 4, the traffic flow is easier to reach a steady state. A comparison of the level of improvement achieved with the null model and the traditional model is presented in the right figure. The black hole represents the Porter model, and the color solid represents the null model. Compared to the Porter model, oscillatory congested states and the slow to start rule are considered in the null model. The known model can reasonably simulate the first order transition from free flow to synchronized flow and from synchronized flow to wide moving jam. At the same time, the linear synchronized flow can be simulated. The fundamental diagram draws a dot line on the flow density and the velocity density play in these three traffic phases: free flow, synchronized flow, and wide moving jam, and the two first order phase transitions between the three phases are distinguished. The straight line with the positive slope of the black rectangle represents free flow. The negative slope of the round circle represents synchronized flow, and the longest line with the negative slope of the blue triangle represents a wide moving jam. When density is 15, which represents free flow. When density is 15, is 25 and 35, which represent synchronized flow. When density is 40, which represent wide moving jam. With further density increase, the range of the synchronized flow expands and the velocity decreases. When the density is more reachable than K2, the synchronized flow is unstable and a moving jam occurs. In 5D, it shows the vehicle's trajectory and it approaches the upstream front of traffic jam, which reveals that the revised update rules modify the unrealistic sudden velocity drop. Similarly, vehicles can accelerate smoothly and comfortably when they leave the downstream of traffic jam. When the density is more significant than K1, the synchronized flow from spontaneously from free flow, and shown in Figure A. The flow decreases significantly when the density returns to K3, and shown in Figure B. In addition, when K is larger than K3, the wide moving jam with a lower velocity appears. The 1 unit average flow and local density figure shows the 1 unit average flow and density, in which the maximum flow and its corresponding density are almost consistent with the empirical data. A virtual detector at Rose's point monitors the flow and the velocity. The local density on the x-axis is calculated by flow velocity. In addition, the straight line with a positive slope corresponds to the free flow, and the synchronized flow is widely displayed in the two-dimensional area of the diagram, and generally shows a linear distribution, and the flow of the synchronized flow decreases with the increase of the global density. Next, we look at the simulation results under the open boundary condition. We have simulated on an open road. The model sets the leftmost cell of the main road corresponding to the position x is 1. The Q in and the Q on are the traffic flow of the main road and the on-ramp respectively, in vehicles units per hour at this timestamp, and the entrance of the main road if the position of the leftmost vehicle is larger than Vmax. A new vehicle with the velocity Vmax will be injected with a probability. If the leading vehicle's position is larger than total length of the road and the main road exit, the leading vehicle will be removed and the following vehicle becomes the leader. When traffic breakdown happens near the on-ramp, various congested patterns can occur. Figure A and B shows the space-time diagrams of two well-known patterns under open boundary conditions with an on-ramp, concluding localize the synchronized pattern and a general pattern. In Figure A, the downstream front of the synchronized flow is fixed at the on-ramp. The upstream front of the synchronized flow is not continuously widening over time, but is localized within 4 kilometers near the bottleneck. So it belongs to the local synchronized pattern. Figure B shows the space-temporal features of the general pattern. It can be seen that the wide moving jam continuously emerges in square in general pattern. In the general pattern, the synchronized flow appears upstream of the merging region, and the wide moving jam spontaneously emerges in the synchronized flow. The downstream front of the jams move upstream with a constant speed and widen continuously. This process is indicated in that figure, showing the 1 minute average flow and velocity at different locations over time in the general pattern. Finally, we make a conclusion. Considering the oscillatory congested states, the model can reasonably simulate the first order transition from free flow to synchronized flow. In addition, by introducing the slow-to-start rule, the model can reasonably simulate the first order transition from synchronized flow to wide moving jam. The results show that the model can better modify the unrealistic deceleration behavior to reflect the driver's behavior in the actual traffic. Thank you for your attention. If there are any points that I didn't make clearly, please point them out, and I'd like to give further explanations.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience? If there are, feel free to write them on the chat box. Okay, I have a simple question. This is a little bit out of my expertise, so I want you to clarify this. But compared to the state of the art in the research in this area, what is the original contribution of this model?
Sorry, I didn't listen clearly.
What is the original contribution? I'll put it in the chat. So what is the original contribution of this model as compared to the state of the art?
The original model.
So what is the originality of this study? Can you hear me?
The original contribution of this model is the phase transitions and the limited deceleration capacity is involved.
So this has not been done in any other model before? Or are there any other models that actually account for these factors as well? Okay, I'm gonna put the question on the chat and then feel free to reply to me on text. And I would like to move on to the next presentation. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So please post your answer in the chat and I will follow it there. Thank you very much. Okay, so our next presenter is Wenjian Cheeah, which I think is already in the room.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. So can you share your screen?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And then he's going to be talking about investigating heterogeneous preference for plug-in vehicles and policy implication from different choice models. So whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Parody. Thanks for your introduction. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Wenjian Cheeah. Currently, I'm an assistant professor from Chang'an University in China. So today I'm going to present my research on electric vehicle adoption with a particular focus on the preference heterogeneity from different choice models. So this is the work has been conducted during my doctoral studies, and it's a collaboration with my advisor, Donna Chen from University of Virginia. Okay, first a little background for this research. So electric vehicle, it has greater potential to help us address the greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, right? And many governments, as you can see from this map, worldwide has set plans to like ban the conventional gasoline vehicle sales. For example, like in the North America, especially in California, they have plans to phase out. They have plans for 100% electric vehicle sales by 2035, and also 2040 from the British Columbia in Canada. For those countries from the Nordic regions, like Norway, Sweden, and Finland, they also have very ambitious EV adoption goals in the next 10 or 20 years. So in contrast to those ambitious goals, how about their existing electric vehicle market share, which turns out relatively low? So we can see those figures, those marked by blue, in those leading countries like in Norway and Sweden. I believe those figures it should be from 2020. Like they're about more than half of the vehicle sales in Norway is electric vehicles. So I think today Norway gonna be a much higher, maybe 90% market share. So this figure is quite old, quite a little bit old. Anyway, so compared to their ambitious adoption goals, the current market share is quite modest in most of the parts of the world. So the critical question here is that to accelerate or to encourage the EV adoption, I think it's critical to examine how consumers, they decide to purchase or adopt EVs, what is their preferences. So we summarize existing studies on the electric vehicle adoption, and here is the results. Most of those existing studies, they focus on the leading markets, like in those Norway, those Nordic countries like Norway, Sweden, or Iceland, etc. And also many studies has been conducted in China, which is currently the largest EV market with the largest EV stock in the world. And also many studies focus on the state of California from the US, which is the leading state in EV adoption in North America. So the message here is that to achieve the environmental benefits of the EV adoption, we should move beyond those leading markets. We should also put our focus on those lagging regions, those especially in those regions with very modest EV market share, and also without strong incentive policies. But these regions, they also have very large like vehicle fleet. So the electrification of the vehicle fleet for those lagging regions is very critical to help us achieve the greenhouse gas emission targets. The second finding from the literature review is that methodologically, right? Okay, two prominent modeling approaches has been used to uncover the consumer's preferences for electric vehicles. One is the latent class models, and another one is the mixed loaded models. So these are very popular discrete choice models that has been very frequently used in travel behavior research, in consumer research. So our question here is that whether different policy implications can be yielded from those different choice models, which has very different behavior interpretations, very different behavioral assumptions underlying those choice models. Okay, so to answer those two questions, we have conducted stated choice experiments. These choice experiments was conducted in the state of Virginia in 2018, which is about 5 years ago. To have a little introduction of the state of Virginia, it is located in the east part of the US, like here, And the EV market share in the state of Virginia, it's roughly lies in the middle across the US. So it's not the leading state, it's neither a lagging state. It's like the market share is like in the middle place across different states in the US. So, and also I want to point out that the incentive policies in this state is also very modest. It don't have very generous like state level incentives, and also it don't have any like HOV land access such as those different incentive measures. So this is our study region, and we have collected the responses from more than 800 respondents. And so this is an example of the choice experiment showing to a respondent it has different we call it alternatives. Like we ask respondents to choose from conventional gasoline vehicles, hybrid vehicles, or plug-in hybrid vehicles, or all electric vehicles. And for each alternative, it has different attributes to describe this alternative. So respondents gonna choose their most preferred alternative. Then based on our choice results, we can develop different choice models to identify or to find out the influential factors behind consumers' vehicle choice decisions. Okay, so first we develop a very basic benchmark model, a multinomial logic model, without considering any preference heterogeneity. So here, preference heterogeneity, it means we can just think as different respondents. They may have different preferences for EVs or EV attributes, which is quite natural, right? Different people have different preferences. And moving beyond this benchmark model, we add another layer of complexity of the modeling, which we considers the preference heterogeneity and estimates a mixed logit model and also a latent class model. So these two models, the mixed logit or latent class, they are basically the same kind of model, just with different assumptions about their parameters, right? For mixed logit model, the parameters, we assume it follows a continuous distribution. So any kind of distribution can be assumed, like a normal distribution, log normal, triangular, etc., right? And differently, for the latent class model, we assume that the coefficient, it follows a discrete distribution. So this is the fundamental difference between the two kind of models. And lastly, we combine the mixed logit and latent class model and estimate a so-called LC-MXL model. So it's still a model that captures preference heterogeneity, but with a higher level of complexity. So it's not only allows for the discrete parameter of our coefficient, but also for each like discrete parameter, it also allows for the continuous distribution within each discrete segment of consumers. Okay, I think we can explain those different model results later. So first, let's show the results from the mixed logit model. And we show that consumers' preference for the battery range vary significantly. Why is that? Because when we examine the estimated parameters, it shows a very significant standard deviation of our coefficient. We can see it shows a mean of like $21 for a marginal increase in battery range. And also the standard deviation is $8, very significant. So we can say that there are significant heterogeneity for the preferences for battery range. So here we use the willingness to pay to help us better interpret our results. The willingness to pay, of course, is calculated based on the marginal substitution between our attribute and an cost attribute. Another finding from the mixed logit model is that we found the standard deviation for the coefficient of charging infrastructure variable is not significant, which means that the preferences for charging infrastructure do not vary significantly across our respondents. Okay, so this is the finding from mixed logit model. Then let's look at the results from the latent class model. So we compare the AIC or BIC from the latent class model with different classes. We have tried 2 classes, 3 classes, 4 classes, and 5 classes. The results turns out a 3-class solution has the best model fit, and it also have a very good behavior interpretation. So finally, we choose a 3-class modeling modeling result. The first class, we can call it a cost-conscious class, which roughly account for 37% of our sample. This class of segments, it is featured by very sensitive to monetary attributes like purchase price, fuel cost, and maintenance cost. So these different monetary attributes. In contrast, they are indifferent to the charging infrastructure prevention. Okay, and then for the second class, it is featured with a high range anxiety, which is about 20% of our sample. They are most sensitive to the battery range, but they are indifferent to charging infrastructure prevention. They are neither care about the incentives. Okay, and the last class of the consumers, it's mostly charging infrastructure aware class. This is the only class it shows sensitivity to the charging infrastructure availability. And this class, they also cares about other EV attributes. They care about the range, they care about incentives. Okay, so these are the 3 distinct classes identified from the latent class models. When we look at the willingness to pay for better range, we can see there is one class which is from class 2, right? The red line. It shows a $77 willingness to pay for a marginal increase in better range. That's why we call it high range anxiety class. They really care about the better range. In contrast, for the another 2 classes, their marginal willingness to pay for better range is relatively lower. Right? Then let's see the results from the hybrid model, which is a combination between latent class and the mixed logit model. This class, it has some feature of latent class, right? So it identifies 2 distinct classes. The first class, we call it non-EV oriented classes, which is about 58% of our sample. Why it's called non-EV oriented? Because in this class, very rare of people considers or choose EVs in their vehicle purchase decision. So this class, they are indifferent to the battery range and charging infrastructure. They only cares about the cost, the monetary attributes. In contrast, the other class, which we call it EV-oriented classes, they are motivated by all EV specific attributes. And the characteristics of this class, they turns out to be more likely to be male, younger age, and have higher education attainment, higher income, and they want a small car instead of a large car. And when we look at the willingness to pay for the battery range, again, let's use the battery range for an example. The LC-MXL model, it identifies 2 classes, right? The red one is the non-EV oriented class, and the blue one is a EV oriented classes. So we can see within each class, there are still variations, right? The distribution is still significant within a specific class, which this result can help us demonstrate the advantage of a hybrid model, which is the combination of latent class and mixed logic model for us to help understand the preference heterogeneity in EV adoption. So this is the behavioral interpretation from different choice models. Next, let's see the model fit and the prediction performance of those different models we have developed. For the model fit, the hybrid model, the LC-MX model, it shows the best model fit performance in terms of the log likelihood and AIC and BIC criteria. In contrast, the latent class model shows the model fit is not very good compared to the other two models. But here we want to know that the latent class model is very useful for us to have, again, an intuition of the preference heterogeneity structure, right? It clearly shows there are different classes within our sample, which has very different preferences. So next one, we also evaluate their prediction performance, the out of sample prediction performance. The different model, the three different models, they as shown in this figure, they roughly show the same kind of prediction performance level. Okay, there is no clear winner across the three models. Last one, we have conducted some market share simulations. So we developed 4 different scenarios, and we want to use our model to calculate the market share under those different scenarios. The base scenario, first, the base scenario, we assume there are limited charging infrastructure and there is no purchase incentives. That we phase out any incentives, and also other attributes like the battery range, purchase price, fuel economy, they remain the same as in our choice experiments. So this is the base scenario. And the first scenario, we call it a range improvement scenario. So we increase the battery range by 50%, what will happen? And the second scenario is, what if we widely deploy the charging infrastructure, right? We have very high density DC faster charging station along interstate highways, and everyone is able to access the workplace charging, and they have plenty of public charging stations. So what will happen if we have this high availability of charging infrastructure? This is the second scenario. The last scenario is we have a very generous purchase incentives, which is $7,500 incentives for EVs. Okay, let's see some results from those scenario analysis. First, when we examine the overall market share, here the overall means the battery electric vehicle plus the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So they are currently the most popular two EVs in the market. So we look at the overall market share. The most effective scenario is scenario 3, which is provide incentives. So the monetary incentive is the most effective, followed by scenario 2, which is deploying more charging infrastructure. And in contrast, the increase of the battery range, it shows a very minor role in improving the PEV market share. Okay. Next, what if we just look at the BEV? The BEV means the battery electric vehicle. It can only powered by electric. It doesn't have any gasoline engine at all. So for the BEV market share, the most effective scenario, the most effective policy measures is what? Is S2, which is deploying more charging infrastructure. In contrast, the purchase incentive, it becomes the second important scenario. And again, the range improvement in BEV, it still doesn't matter very much. Lastly, for the PHEV, which is it can not only powered by electric vehicle by electricity, it can also powered by gasoline. For this kind of EV, we found out only purchase incentive is matter for increase its share. in contrast, increase its battery range, or we have greater charging infrastructure, it plays a very minor role for the PHEV adoption. Okay, so this shows us that different policy measures, they may have very different effectiveness if we look at a specific vehicle powertrain type, right? So for PHEV and for BEV, the most effective policy measures is very different. And next one, what if we look at different consumer segments, right? So are those different policy measures, they show different effectiveness with different consumer segments? The answer is yes, right? So let's look at the Latin class model, for example. It identifies the three different consumer segments in our sample. For the first class, which is cost conscious, the most effective policy measure gonna be, right, intuitively, right? We provide incentives for them because they are cost conscious, right? So we provide incentives, purchase incentive to them is most effective. They can increase the EV share from 3% to 9%. And for the second class, we call it high range anxiety class. They are very sensitive to the battery range. But the interesting finding here is that even we increase the battery range by 50%, it does not increase their adoption intention. The market share is still very low for this class.
Can you please summarize?
I'm sorry?
22 minutes. Already 22 minutes. I want to leave some time for questions.
Okay. So this is a general conclusion. So if you have very detailed questions, you can just download this paper, which is published in GRA, or you can just drop me an email and we can discuss in more detail later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was exactly 23 minutes, which is the time we have allowed. So there is one question on the chat box, so let me read it. So is it possible to use some, I'm guessing, exploratory factor analysis to determine the Latin classes?
Thanks for this question. I believe the factor analysis and latent class modeling, it has shared some similar properties, but I believe they are two very different statistical methods. For latent class model, I believe it's mainly used to help us to identify different segments from our sample, right? So it is one of the model form of discrete choice models. So if you are familiar with discrete choice models, you can see that there are mixed logic models or latent class models. The only difference between those two models is our assumption about our model coefficients. So if we assume the coefficients follows a discrete distribution, so then we generally call it a latent class model. So this is the I think the key characteristic of a latent class model. In terms of the explanatory factor analysis, I think it's more like a dimension reduction approach. We want to reduce, like if we have a lot of variables and we want to reduce the dimension of the variables, we can use factor analysis to extract some main factors from those different factors. So I think they are very different approaches, and I rarely see people use factor analysis between latent class models. Maybe I'm wrong. So if anyone have any experience about that, we can talk that in detail later.
No, I agree in general with your response. Okay, so I have one additional question, but because we don't have time, I'll post it on the chat and maybe you can respond to me on the chat box.
Okay, thanks, Parody.
So thank you very much. And then I would like to move on to the next presenter, which is Lynette, right?
Hello, yes.
So whenever you're ready, please share your screen and let's start.
Great. I have a question for Wenjian too, but maybe I'll put it to later if we have time. Thank you so much for hosting all of us. So I want to thank the Kara, Jason, Ellie, Giancarlos, Nasser, and team for hosting us and organizing this very inclusive and low carbon conference. So thank you for that. So today my presentation, which follows on very nicely from Wenjian's presentation, is about the relationship between EV charger availability and charge anxiety in a city. So while Wenjian spoke about purchasing decisions, this is more about charging behavior and how EV owners might feel about it. So let me jump in. This is joint work with my master student, Shannon, and a colleague of mine, Samuel. So Samuel's a psychologist and I work on transportation modeling. So it's a very nice confluence of different disciplines coming together to try to understand a bit more about EV charging behavior. We were interested to pursue this study to look at charging behavior in cities. I think when we reviewed the literature, we found that there are a lot of different EV charging demand models to try to look at the impact of EV users on the electricity grid. What might the demand be? Many of them often assume that users are very rational. Also that the charging behaviors tend to be built on some assumptions about how it's very consistent behavior in terms of when they charge their vehicles and do not charge their vehicles. Also, since many of these studies are in the markets, like we saw in the earlier presentation, in markets where it might be more less urbanized. So these are places where the EV users or drivers tend to be more affluent and might have their own residential homes and therefore have the access to their privately owned chargers, which may not be the case in cities. So I live in Singapore, in our city. Many of our residents live in high-rise apartments, just like the ones shown in this picture here. So in all likelihood, the charging opportunities are going to be shared public chargers. So this is where you have a common parking lot, and some of these lots have been converted to EV charging lots. And then it's shared use, right, among the EV owners within that building. So that's the context that we're looking at. We wanted to bring in some behavioral insights to the way we model EV charging behavior in a city context. And specifically, we want to consider how users interact with these chargers. We anticipate that there will be many different ways that people will use these chargers, different levels of charge anxiety. So I will elaborate a bit more about this term shortly. And then the other phenomenon that we might expect is this prevalence of charger hogging. So this is where you might overstay a parking lot, a charging lot, even though your vehicle is already fully charged, right? So this tendency to overstay is something that we hope to incorporate into our approach. To study these behaviors, we turned to a Python-based tool. It's an open source Python-based tool called EmotePy, offered by a German group. So they've made this openly available, which we're very grateful for. So this tool helps to incorporate some inputs like your trip characteristics, the EV models that are available, the chargers available, and it would then give you an output in terms of its usage, the charge demand. So we calibrated this to Singapore's context, taking into account the trips in Singapore, the kinds of EV models in Singapore, the availability of chargers for now that's now being rolled out very rapidly in this context. So we take into account mobility statistics, vehicle characteristics, assumptions on how people move around, how many chargers are available, and then it would deliver some user profiles as outputs. And in each user profile will give you things like where the user is throughout its day. So it's time series results, the trip destination throughout the day, the state of charge of the vehicles, the charger use, as well as, and then from there, we're also interpreting the charge anxiety. So let me tell you a bit more about this concept of charge anxiety. So you're more familiar probably with range anxiety, right? So this is where you're concerned about, whether your vehicle can fulfill the distance that you need to cover. But we decided to focus on this concept of charge anxiety, where maybe as mobile phone users, all of us like to charge our mobile phones, right? And sometimes you like to charge it when it's, even though it's like 80%, 90% fully charged, you would still want to plug it in. Some people are more they're less concerned about the charge, so they'll wait for the battery to drain until only 20% before they start charging their phones. So same thing for EVs. We expect that different people might have different levels of what we call psychological safety buffers. This is the minimum battery level that they would like to maintain at all times. This can evolve. I can anticipate that EV drivers would have, once they get more experience using their vehicles, more familiar, maybe this safety buffer might vary, right? But we're going to assume that different people would have different safety buffers, and then charge anxiety, we define it as the concern that users experience when their battery state of charge falls below this safety buffer. So in order to represent the distribution of this safety buffer across the users that we're going to be simulating, we've assumed a beta distribution, which is skewed towards the right, meaning more users would prefer to maintain the battery at higher levels of charge in order to fulfill the range that they are looking for. Okay. And then the other phenomena that we spoke of was this charger hogging. So think of an EV charging lot. I think it represents both access to a charger, which is why people park there, but it's also real estate, right? So in a very busy city like Singapore, where we have to share our spaces in a shared parking lot, space is also premium, and we anticipate that people might behave differently around these shared lots. So literature has found that drivers tend to use public chargers more if they perceive charging opportunities to be limited. So it's very dependent also on how they perceive charging opportunities. And in general, sharing etiquette is needed, right? So these are some guidelines on how to best share and how to maybe move your vehicle when you're done charging. Is it fair to unplug from someone else and plug in your vehicle, things like that. So we need some guidelines, right, to make everyone feel comfortable charging their vehicles when it comes to these shared parking lots. So in our approach, we are going to look at 4 different scenarios of high or low supply of chargers, EV chargers, high or low hogging phenomena. And for each of these 4 scenarios, we're going to be simulating 50 user profiles. So these are generated to simulate how they use the chargers available in a home-based shared EV charger. So a total of 200 EV user profiles will be generated. And for each of these user profile, like I mentioned, we will have information about time series information about where they are located, the electricity consumed, the charging information. And then again, like I mentioned, each user is assigned to this unique psychological safety buffer as to how much they want to charge their vehicle at, maintain their vehicle battery level at before they start feeling anxious about it. So just to elaborate on the 4 scenarios. So again, we have high or low charger hogging phenomena. So within the model, we looked at the maximum amount of time that they are plugged in. So it's a maximum of 6 hours if it's low charger hogging. So that's the amount of time needed to fully charge based on a slow charger. And then high charger hogging would mean that they will remain in the lot even though they are fully charged. And then the other axis shows high or low charger availability. So this is probability of getting access to a charger at home would be set lower if it's low charger availability, and whereas you might be more likely to find an available charger if supply is adequate. So Singapore is at a stage right now where we're rolling out a lot of these charging infrastructure, investing in building these at the shared estates, like the picture that we saw. So this is really the midst of the transition that we're witnessing, which would likely be the case in many other cities that are now rolling out these EV policies, pro-EV policies. So the 4 simulation outputs, like I mentioned, we will have an understanding of the locations where they are, the charger availability in each location, the battery state of charge, which would then represent how many of our users feel this charge anxiety, meaning the battery has fallen below what they're comfortable with. So these are all in time series. So let me walk you through some of the results. So this first set of results shows the location share, meaning through the course of the day, whether the users are driving at home, at the workplace, running errands or leisure activities. And then we have this results for 7 days of the week shown on the horizontal. So the first 5 are weekdays, the next 2 are the weekend. Pretty consistent mobility patterns across all scenarios. This is the result for the first scenario of high charging supply, low hogging. But across all 4, you'll see very similar patterns. That's why I didn't show all of them. A high proportion of users are at the workplace during the working hours, peaking at about 7 p.m. On weekends, most of the users at home. This is the way we sort of entered our mobility patterns, right? So it's so far the results are as expected. And then between 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., this is when users are active, and up to 11% of the vehicle fleet would be driving. So again, this is a phenomenon that it's not unexpected so far. On charger availability, so this is a result that shows the availability of fast and slow chargers that have been modeled into the home locations. All scenarios show regular daily peaks in the charger use at the night time. So meaning when users return home, they will charge their vehicle overnight. So this is when the chargers are used extensively. This is again an attribute of the way the model was set up. Most of the charging opportunities were defined at home, and a majority of the users do charge at home in the evening. We see some interesting results. So these 2 charts here show a high and low hogging scenario in a context of low charger supply. And we see that higher hogging results in lower charging availability, which is again intuitive, right? So if more people are hogging, then your chances of finding an available charger would be lower. In terms of battery state of charge, so these results on the right-hand side again shows for different days of the week, the battery state of charge from 0 to 100% for the 4 scenarios. So we find that the battery state of charge tends to be highest in the evening time when they are being charged overnight, lowest at about 6 p.m. This is when users return back home and need to charge the vehicle. The state of charge also varies quite widely throughout the day, depending on the trips that people make. So far, this is something that we did, was not surprising. For the last scenario of low charger supply, high hogging, this is the case where you have the most limited amount of charging opportunities at home, and we find that there's greater variability in the battery state of charge. So we're able to interpret now this battery state of charge in terms of this charge anxiety that we defined, right? This is again the level. These are again the on the vertical axis, it would be the percentage of users who experience state of charge below their safety buffer. So all scenarios actually saw anxiety peaks around the evening time. So this is again the crunch time where everyone's at home trying to charge their vehicles, more so during the weekdays. And in scenarios with low charger hogging behaviors, which is scenario 1 and scenario 3, there were actually periods where no charge anxiety was observed amongst the users, meaning 0% on this chart. For the last scenario, again, the one that's most constrained, where you have low availability of chargers available, and then you have high hogging behavior. So this is where we see the highest charge anxiety. So that's a black line shown on this chart, where it can even reach like 40%, meaning 40% of users would feel that they want to charge, but their battery level is lower than what their threshold would be. Right. So to summarize some of the key findings and recommendations, we find that user behaviors can certainly affect charger availability in cities where you have to share these chargers. So reducing hogging behaviors can really help. It can really help to increase charger availability and can offset the effects of low charger supply. So I think this is very critical, again, for cities which are transitioning and then investing in all these infrastructure. As we invest, we should think about ways that drivers would interact with these charging opportunities, and in order to create more opportunities for everybody, think about these possible behaviors. So for cities with low charger supply in the early stages of the EV transition, we would encourage them to consider actively discouraging hogging behaviors, maybe by implementing pricing strategies or considering ways to incentivize users to charge outside the home such as in workplaces or other common other public spaces would help to smoothen out the peaks in user charge anxiety, particularly during the weekdays at the home location. So this was preliminary work. We certainly recognize that there's more that we can do to improve the study. We can survey users on charge anxiety and whether this phenomenon is truly happening. So the beta distribution that I shared earlier, we are actually doing some surveys right now about this topic, meaning when do users tend to plug in their vehicle, right? Do they wait until the battery depletes all the way down, or do they tend to do it as long as the opportunity is available? Second is to look at refining the prevalence of charger hogging, how this is happening. I think this is something that we had already observed with the low levels of EV penetration that we have, that we're witnessing in this city. So we really see how the community sort of has to cooperate in terms of sharing the lot, meaning I've seen groups where they create chat groups, like, oh, I'm done with the lot charging, I'm going to move my vehicle now, it's going to be available. So it's a very ground up sort of a behavior and very interesting aspects, but we see this might be an issue once we scale up the EV usage, right, in these shared spaces. The other thing is to update the charger availability once that improves, including non-home public chargers once they become more available in our context, and maybe account for the possibility of smart charging or different pricing strategies into the modeling effort to explore the effects of these possibilities. So that's all I had. Very nice small presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and I welcome any questions at this point.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Very interesting. While the audience warms up, I'm going to ask a very naive question, perhaps. But regarding the parking situation, you showed like this very tall, like apartment buildings, but not everybody has a car in those mansions, right? So in that case, but everybody that has a car has a parking space. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, those will have a car, but the number of charging lots are limited. So even though everyone has a parking lot, it's the charging access that's more limited. Yeah,
so that was what I wanted to go. So like, is it how difficult would it to expand the charging docks so that you can have each parking space would have one? Is it like massively expensive or?
Right. That would be very nice, but you're right that it's going to be quite expensive. Right now, I think they're only talking about 5 to 10% of the lots that they want to convert and make available. I think it has to keep pace. The challenge is to keep pace with the EV sales and making sure that so I think that's where we're struggling with. That's why the sharing, I think, becomes even more relevant.
Okay, are there any questions from the audience? We have 5 minutes, so very good time for discussion. Okay, while they warm up, another question. So I did not get a lot of the details of how the model works, but I was curious, like, were you able to quantify how, in spite of charger anxiety, how many people actually were looking for a charger but did not find one?
Yeah. So we assume, yes. So we assume that if the user falls below this safety buffer, you would be in a case where you're looking for a charging opportunity, but you do not have.
Okay. So that would be like not only psychological, but also actually the possibility that you'd actually not find it.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Interesting. I'm gonna name names here, but maybe like Wenjian has some questions because the topics are very similar. So if you have any comments, suggestions, questions, please do.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for your presentation, Professor Cheeah. And I do have a question about when you talk about your future research. It's about your survey on the range anxiety. I assume your survey target is the electric vehicle users, right? They are current adopters of EVs. So, so my experience is that targeting those EV users is quite difficult. So I'm quite curious about how you find out the survey targets.
Yeah. I had an initial concern as well, same concern when we wanted to do this survey. So I happened to have a Chinese student doing her master's with us this year, And she was able to access quite a number of EV users in China because the penetration there is much higher. So she was able to do her survey over there. So the questions that she asked were about what level of the battery state of charge do they wait until before they start looking for charging opportunities, or what's the tolerable range before they start feeling anxious about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so it seems there are no more questions. So if there are no more questions, I would like to wrap it up here. But if you come up with something in the middle of other presentations, just put it in the chat and I'm pretty sure Lynette will tackle them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then I would like to move on to the next presenter, who is Matthew Daus, which I'm not sure if he's here.
Okay, since Matthew not here, we have his presentation and I can share my screen and play the...
Cool, but if the final presenter, which is Adeeba Nas, would like to present ahead, because I would like to prioritize the people that are here.
Yes.
So Adeeba, can you present now?
Yes, I can present now.
Okay, so let's do that, and then we'll show the video as a last present.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, just give me 1 second. Hello everyone, I'm Adeeba Nas. Welcome to my presentation. I will be presenting our paper titled Integration of Circular Waterway to Transport Municipal Solid Waste, a case study of Dhaka City. My co-authors are Sadar Ishaq Khan Rad, Sahabi Mahmood, and Mahmudul Hassan Kothik. We are 4 postgraduate students from Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. So in this presentation, I will begin by explaining the objectives of our study, what we intended to achieve, and then I will get into the problem identification part, where I will explain the problem that we tried to focus on in our research here, and followed by our proposed solution and the feasibility analysis of our proposed solution. And then I will get into the methodology part. I will provide a comprehensive overview of our methodology and cost analysis. And I will conclude with our findings, our recommendations, and some limitations of our study and directions for future study. So first, let's see what the objectives were for our study. The current scenario of municipal solid waste transportation of Dhaka city is not up to the mark, and it has severe negative impacts on both the transportation system as well as on the environment. So we try to analyze the alternatives that are available using cost effectiveness analysis and try to reduce the negative impacts on the city. And while doing so, we try to check whether it is possible to integrate the circular waterways and roadways to transport MSW in Dhaka city, and also try to provide a sustainable and climate inclusive solution. And in doing so, we address the knowledge gap that currently exists in multimodal waste transportation, particularly waste transportation using barge and roadways together. So to understand our objectives, let's first get to the core of the problem. Currently, the municipal solid waste of Dhaka city is transported from the households to the landfill exclusively by roadways. But this necessitates the construction of multiple secondary garbage transfer stations throughout the city. But due to poor management and because of the problems that comes with garbage management, these secondary transfer stations usually eventually becomes the sources of serious hazards. And also these secondary transfer stations causes congestion of traffic also. Here we have provided some pictures that we took outside of some secondary transfer stations in our study area. Here we can see some snippets from a local newspaper of Bangladesh, which is the Daily Star. We can see that Dhaka City Corporation is stating that Dhaka is the capital of Bangladesh, I would like to mention, and the Dhaka City Corporation is stating that these secondary garbage transfer stations are drawing mixed reactions from the public.
So I would like to elaborate here what a secondary garbage transfer station is. A secondary garbage transfer station is an intermediate point in the garbage transportation. It is a place where vans that collect the waste from households transfer the waste from these small vans to a large dump truck. This is not so the secondary garbage transfer station is not a point where the waste is supposed to be stored, but it is just a transfer point. But because of in most cases we see that the garbage eventually become stored in these places also. If we see here, it says that it was found that the construction of 13 more secondary transfer station was underway in the southern part of Dhaka city, whether it was planned to build 57 more garbage sheds. So it reflects how the local people are protesting against the construction of the secondary garbage transfer stations because of the negative impacts of these STS in the locality. Here we can see the current scenario of municipal solid waste transportation of Dhaka city. In our scenario, the primary waste generators are the households, and from the households, a primary transfer vehicle, which is a non-motorized van, carries the waste from the household to a secondary transfer station. And in secondary transfer station, they form a queue behind a compactor truck. A compactor truck is a 5-ton truck, which waits at the secondary transfer station for the vans. And after transferring the waste to the compactor truck carries the waste to a landfill. In our case, it is the Matwal landfill. So as I already mentioned that these STS are not supposed to store the waste. But in most cases, we see that the waste exceeds the capacity of compactor trucks. And in those scenarios, a payloader truck comes and carries the excess waste that remained in the secondary transfer station to the Matwal landfill. Now, the problem with this system is that it requires a large number of secondary transfer stations to be built inside the city boundary. But this secondary transfer station becomes the source of odor nuisance and also many health concerns. A study showed that the people that reside within 5 kilometer radius of these STS are under serious health hazard. And this secondary transfer station also emits huge amount of greenhouse gas. And to better understand the perspective of public on these secondary transfer stations, we conducted a public opinion survey in our locality. And we found that almost 74% of the respondents stated that they would oppose it if a new secondary transfer station was going to be built in their locality. So it reflects the local insubordination towards this STS, which makes the land acquisition even more difficult. So although this process is being used in our country now, it is becoming obsolete day by day because we can't just ignore the locals' insubordination or the protest from the locals and carry on this process. We have to look for some other method to transfer the waste. And this process also causes roadblocks and bottlenecks because of the van have to form a queue behind the dump truck. So we need a solution that encompasses all these problems. For our odor nuisance and health concerns, we need a healthier alternative. For the huge amount of greenhouse gas that is being emitted in residential areas, we need a sustainable alternative. And for our local insubordination and for the congestion problems, we need to decentralize the transportation system of municipal solid waste. And fortunately, there is a solution that responds to this problem. The Dhaka city is blessed with a 110 kilometer of circular waterway at its city boundary. And this circular waterway consists of 4 major rivers, and they are River Buriganga, Turak, Chitalakha, and Balu. And so we are proposing that we integrate this circular waterway with the roadway to transport the municipal solid waste. So a question arises whether this entire circular waterway or the portion that we need to transfer the waste, is this navigable? And the answer is yes, it is navigable. And even though there exist some points of constriction, the good news is that a $2.9 billion worth of project has been taken under the Delta 2030 plan, which aims to restore navigation in this water route even further. So our proposed solution is that we carry the waste from the primary waste generator, which is the households, to a barge loading station using motorized vans, as opposed to the non-motorized vans that are currently being used in the existing scenario. I will explain later why we need to motorize our vans. And then from this barge loading station, a barge will carry the MSW completely through the circular waterway to a barge unloading station. This barge unloading station will be located close to the Waterway landfill at the outskirts of the city. And then from the barge unloading station, a payloader truck will carry the waste to the Waterway landfill. So it decentralizes the entire transportation system of the MSW. Now, to check the feasibility or the suitability of the of using the circular waterway, we check the minimum and maximum depth of the waterway. And we are actually concerned with the minimum depth only because it is the minimum depth that if the water goes below a minimum depth, then it becomes difficult to operate the barge in the waterway, but the maximum depth is not of concern here. So we found that the most bottlenecked location is at Tongikhal, where the average depth of water throughout the year is 2.4 meter. And this and if we consider a 0.5 meter clearance, then the minimum draft becomes 1.9 meter. Now, what do we mean by draft? Draft is the depth of water below the bottommost point of the barge. And so we need a barge that can operate on 1.9 meter of water, and the maximum draft is 3.96 meter. But as I've mentioned, it is not as much concerned as the minimum draft. And now let's get a comprehensive overview of our methodology. The first step was field data collection. Our primary data providers were Bangladesh Inland Water Transport Authority, which is BIWTA, and we also collected some data from the supervisors of SCS by focus group discussion. So after collecting our field data, we located our secondary transfer stations. We selected 4 secondary transfer stations for our study. And close to this secondary transfer station, we chose a possible barge station. And surrounding this barge station, we determined our feasible van coverage. And after that, we determined the daily MSW generation in the study area that we have to deal with. And from this MSW generation, we selected the optimum barge size. And after that, we conducted the financial and economic analysis and compared our proposed solution with the existing method. So here we can see the study stations or our 4 secondary transfer stations that we are focusing on this study. The red pins here represent the secondary transfer stations and the green pin here represents the landfill. So we selected these 4 secondary transfer stations because they already exist, and these are some of the most problematic secondary transfer stations in Dhaka city. And the average distance of these secondary transfer stations from the Waterway landfill is about 14.2 kilometers. So in the current scenario, this entire length is covered using roadways only. And for our solution, we selected a barge loading station and a barge unloading station. The barge loading station is Gudaraghat dock, and our barge unloading station is Shampur dock. Both of these docks already exist, and this is why we chose this dock. And another reason for choosing Shampur dock is this dock is closest to the Waterway landfill. Now, here we can see our proposed route. The Dhanmondi and Azimpur area is the area from where we will be collecting the MSW, and we will transport the waste using a municipal solid waste. A non-motorized van. We will transport the municipal solid waste to the Gudaraghat dock, and then using this circular waterway, a barge will carry the waste to the Gudaraghat dock, and from the Gudaraghat dock, the waste will be carried to the red dot, which represents the Waterway landfill. Now, as I've already mentioned, we need to motorize our vans. But why do we need that? It is because currently the waste, number of secondary transfer stations in Dhaka city is not only these 4. Rather, Dhaka city has a large number of secondary transfer stations. So what we do now is the non-motorized vans carry the waste from the households to its nearest secondary transfer station, and from the secondary transfer station, a truck carries the waste to the Waterway landfill. But if we want to eliminate the secondary transfer stations, then we need to carry the waste from the households directly to the Gudaraghat dock. And to get this mileage, we need to motorize our van, because this average distance from our study secondary transfer station to the Gudaraghat dock is about 3.5 kilometers. And from our focus discussion with the secondary transfer station supervisors, we came to know that each secondary transfer station has 75 vans. And so for our 4 secondary transfer stations, we will need to motorize 300 vans in total. Now, these are some of the MSW data that we collected for each SCS. The waste generation per capita per day is 0.34 kg. And so from our population density in the study area, we calculated that the waste generation per SCS is 30 to 35 tons. So for 4 SCS, we need to handle 120 to 140 tons of MSW. And the capacity of compactor trucks, payloader trucks, and vans are 5 to 7 tons and 20 tons and 400 to 450 kg respectively. Now, as I have mentioned already, that we have to deal with 140 tons of waste if we want to eliminate these secondary transfer stations. But if we want to be on the conservative side, we can round it up to 150 tons. And this is what we did. And so we have to select a barge that has a capacity of greater than or at least equal to 180 tons, and that can operate within the draft limit of 1.9 to 3.96 meters. And in our case, we have to keep in mind that we are transporting waste or municipal solid waste using the waterways. So we have to make sure there is no spillage or there is no water pollution. To ensure this, we provided a freeboard of 3 meters. And for this, we selected a barge of capacity 180 ton instead of 150 ton. Now, let's get into our analysis part. We consider 2 types of cost here. One is financial cost and the other is economic cost. And we did our analysis with a time frame of 20 years because 20 years is the design life of the secondary transfer stations in Dhaka city. And we use a discount rate of 6.15% because it is the discount rate that are usually used in projects under government of Bangladesh. Now, these are the equations that we have used for our financial cost analysis. The first one is for the existing scenario and the second one is for the proposed scenario. In the first one, we see that we calculated the initial cost, which is the buying cost and the variable cost and the fixed cost. The variable cost represents the fuel cost and the fixed cost represents the maintenance cost and the driver's cost. And we calculated this cost for compactor trucks as well as the payloader trucks. And then we also calculated the cost of construction of secondary transfer stations. And now in our proposed scenario, we calculated the similar costs for barges and payloader trucks. And these costs are the initial cost, which is the buying cost and variable cost and fixed cost. And we also took into account the motorization cost of vans. These are some relevant information that we needed for our analysis. For example, we need some distances, and the distances that we needed are the distance traveled by compactor truck, existing payloader truck, proposed payloader truck, and the proposed barge. We also needed the operating costs of driver cost and maintenance cost. We obtained this from market analysis. Now, this is the financial cost calculation of our study. We see that in a roadway only method or in the existing scenario, we calculated the cost of compactor truck, payloader truck, and secondary transfer station construction. And in the multimodal MSW transport or our proposed scenario, we calculated the cost of barge, the motorization of vans cost, and the cost of payloader truck. Now, let's say that as I've already mentioned, we are dealing with 4 secondary transfer stations. So we are considering 4 secondary transfer station construction costs, and each secondary transfer station has 2 compactor trucks each. So we have 8 compactor trucks here, and we have 1 payloader truck here. But interestingly, we have 2 payloader trucks in our proposed scenario. It is because in the existing scenario, a payloader truck is only complementary to the compactor truck. It is the primary responsibility of compactor truck to carry the waste from the SCS to the landfill. But in case the waste exceeds the capacity of compactor truck, in that case, we need a payloader truck. And so only 1 payloader truck usually does the work in the existing method. But in our proposed scenario, there will not be any compactor truck. Rather, from the barge unloading station, a payloader truck will carry the entire waste from the barge to the Matwal landfill. So therefore, we need 2 payloader trucks. And these are the costs that we have used in our calculation, these fixed operating costs, variable unit cost, and initial cost. And these are the total costs here. And if we see here, this is the final financial cost in the existing method and our proposed barge method. Here we can see that our financial cost in the existing method per day for 4 SCS is 105.82,000 BDT. 112 BDT is equal to $1 US here. And if we adopt our method, we can reduce the cost by 42.51%, and we can bring the financial cost down to 60.84,000 BDT only. And similarly, we also calculated our economic cost, and for our economic cost, we considered 5 external costs here. And they are noise, air pollution and climate, infrastructure, accidents, and congestion. And these are the economic cost external indices. And these are the indices for truck, and these are the indices for barge. But we used these indices from Handbook on the External Cost of Transport version 2019, which is published by European Commission. We use this because this data has not yet been calibrated for the context of Dhaka city yet. Now, this is a visual representation or graphical representation of the economic cost, external cost indices in both the systems. Here, the light blue bars represent the cost associated with the barge system or our proposed system, and the dark blue bars represent the cost of the existing system. We see that the economic cost of barge system is much lower than the existing system in almost all the scenarios except for the infrastructure cost only. It is because the infrastructure cost of the barge loading, unloading station and the barge is very high compared to the existing system. These are the equations that we have used for our economic cost analysis. The first one is for existing scenario and the second one is for other proposed scenario. Here the alpha is the index of economic external cost. Now this is the calculation of our economic cost. It is similar to the financial cost analysis, so I will not get into this anymore. Now this is the final economic cost of the existing method and the barge method. We see that the economic cost of the existing system per day for 4 SCS is 19.2,000 BDT, but we can reduce this by 50.3% by adopting our method, our proposed method, and reduce it to 9.55,000 BDT per day. So from both the economic and financial analysis, we find that our proposed solution is superior over the existing one. And we also check the feasibility or suitability of using the circular waterway that is already existing in Dhaka city. So it is also a feasible option. Therefore, multimodal barge road transport using 180-ton capacity barge can be identified as a better option to the existing system. And so our research provides valuable insights to policymakers for effective MSW transport in Dhaka city. These are the limitations in our study. The two of the major limitations are provided here. The first one is the lack of economic external cost data for Dhaka city. As I've already mentioned, we use the data from Handbook on the External Cost of Transport, which is published by European Commission. But as the traffic condition of Dhaka city is inferior compared to these countries, we can say that we stayed on the conservative side, but still it led to some inaccuracies in our results. And we also took into account only 4 secondary transfer stations, whereas there are many more secondary transfer stations in our study area. So one can incorporate, we could or one can include these secondary transfer stations in the future study. These are the directions for future study. Okay, these are the directions for future study. One can obtain the local economic external cost data, and one can also extend the model for scalability and perform break-even distance analysis and conduct sensitivity analysis. So that's all from us. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
That only left us for 30 seconds of questions. So are there any questions from the audience? You can feel free to post them on the chat.
Yes, just drop those questions in the chat box. I'll try to respond.
But in the meantime, we still have a little bit of time. So your proposal here seems to be like a no-brainer for policymakers. So what do you think will be the barriers for implementing such a scheme?
The problems in implementing.
Barriers, yes.
Yes, the biggest problem is that we need to build a loading station and unloading station close to the waterway. But it is difficult in our context because Dhaka is already a completely matured city or built up city. So there is not much open space there. So we use the existing dock in our study. But if we want to use this dock for municipal solid waste transportation, we need to expand the area and also expand the operating capacity of this dock, which can be a barrier in implementing this in real scenario.
Is that the cost of that modification of the docks is introduced in your calculations as well?
We did not introduce this cost explicitly because we are not sure of this cost, as when we consulted with the BIWTA, the Bangladesh Inland Water Transport Authority, they assured us that they have the docks already. They are using this to transport stones or sand or other materials like this. So so for MSW transportation, we just need to implement the management systems or the to ensure that no hazards are being caused from here, but they have the docks and other systems already there.
Okay, thank you very much. Since there are no questions in the chat box, I would like to wrap it up here. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
And then to move on to the final presentation of this session, I would like to ask Nasser to play Matthew's presentation on the equity impact of New York City congestion pricing for taxi and for hire vehicles.
Sure, sure. Let me just share my screen. Okay, do you have my screen now?
Yes, I can see the screen.
And please let me know if you have the voice or not.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Daus.
Yes, we can hear, yeah.
Okay.
The conference at BTR 5 for inviting me to speak again. I believe I've spoken last year and in conferences past, so it's always great to be back virtually for this important conference. My topic here today is equity impacts of New York City congestion pricing on taxi and for-hire vehicle drivers. This is session 8, which deals with congestion management and sustainable transportation systems. Once again, just by way of intro, I'm the former longest serving New York City Taxi and Limousine Commissioner, CEO and Chair, and for the last 12 years, I've been wearing a number of different hats. I'm president of the International Association of Transport Regulators, which is a nonprofit group of government transportation professionals that license and regulate not just taxis and for-hire vehicles and some buses, but also TNCs. It's a best practices group. We hold conferences. We issue reports. I'm also Transportation Technology Chair, formerly Distinguished Lecturer at the City University of New York at City College up in Harlem, where we have a University Transportation Research Center for decades now. Our latest center, CEMTAC, is one of the proud winners of the infrastructure federal research funds that came out of USDOT, and which is going to be based upon equity research, which is very much about the paper that I'm about to present today. Our region is New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico, and I'm a proud member of that center. I'm also a transportation lawyer, which will factor into some of my comments. I have been practicing law for, I think, over 25 years at this point. I specialize in transportation law, mobility, regulation, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Windows Marks, where I chair the transportation law practice. Very involved with the Transportation Research Board, and I'm also chair of the New York City Bar Association's transportation. So those are the many hats that I wear, which gives me a very unique perspective. And I was a proud architect of what's known as the Plan YC Transportation Plan with Mayor Bloomberg, who I worked for in New York City many years ago, was one of the first, if not the first, United States sustainability plans, and we had taxis and for-hire vehicles a prominent part of it. And that's really kind of where the congestion pricing movement began in New York. There were some failed attempts at that time by Mayor Bloomberg, who was a visionary, to try to get this done early on. And years later now, we're back at it with both the prior and current governor and mayors supporting it, and having the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Public Transit Agency in New York, take the lead. But really what caused some of the traction that led to this movement was an organization known as Move New York, which was formed by Gridlock Sam Schwartz, who is a good friend, and he coined the term gridlock, yes, former traffic commissioner for Mayor Koch many years ago. And he kind of brought this back to the forefront. And you can see the history on the screen of how this all evolved. But he's the one who brought it to the forefront in 2015 and the years that ensued with the public relations campaign and a lot of media coverage, which led during what we call in New York, the summer of hell, which was when the subways weren't working in around 2016, and there was a lot of heat, literally and figuratively, on the governor to fix it. He came up with the Fix New York City Advisory Panel, which included Sam and many others, that put the Move New York and congestion pricing and coordinated tolling plans into a recommendation report, which you can still access online. The panel made these recommendations, and which included early implementation of the surcharge in New York City Central Business District for congestion pricing for taxis and for-hire vehicles and Ubers and Lyfts, what we refer to as high-volume apps, and in other states as TNCs, Transportation Network Companies. And phase 1 and 2 are implemented, as you can see, but phase 3 is the big one now that we're dealing with. And as of April 2019, we've been collecting tolls. I think almost $1 billion have been collected from the taxis and the for-hire industry, which have been put to the capital program. And now we're in the next phase, which was stalled for a while under the prior administration, but which now has finally gotten the green light from Federal Highways. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. The latest we have, and for those of you who need a crash course in environmental law, I'll give it to you since I teach it at City College as part of my sustainable class. Sustainable transportation. I've been teaching it for the last 10 years. There's 3 things we need to know: an EIS, an EAS, and a FONSI. It has nothing to do with Happy Days. Environmental assessment under the national and state and local environmental laws basically is a process that you go through to assess whether there's a significant impact on the environment. If there is, then basically you have to do an environmental impact study, which is a very costly and time-consuming endeavor to assess and mitigate environmental impacts. And a FONSI, a finding of no significant interest, is an administrative finding by the lead agency, which basically says you don't need an environmental study. So that actually leads to a more streamlined process for getting a project done. And that's exactly what we're dealing with right now. The draft environmental assessment process started this time last year in the summer of 2022. And, at that time, I had completed this report that I'm talking about, known as Equity Impacts and Congestion Pricing on the Taxi and For-Hire Industry. It's not just drivers, but passengers. It's on our website at our University Transportation Research Center. You can find it there. Here's a cover of the report. And, there are 3 equity considerations that we went through when we analyzed how communities would be impacted in our industry. Income, geographic, and modal equity. And the benefits and burdens are not equally distributed among all drivers and passengers. And this was the main point we were trying to make during the public comment process. And this report makes the case for taxi and for-hire vehicle exemptions. I know people who are advocates in this area don't like too many exemptions and the whole system falls apart, but New York City is kind of a unique situation. First of all, we've been already collecting a tax, and the industry was kind of told early on that this is it, we're implementing you early. And even before that, the taxis, even when I was commissioner back in the 2000s, had an MTA surcharge put on before congestion pricing happened. So they're being charged, passengers that is, $250 per trip. If you're a taxi, $275 for FHVs, and shared rides like via 75 cents per trip. This already generated all this revenue, as you could see, over $1 billion year by year. But now the MTA is looking to do that again and add additional amounts to an industry which is recovering from COVID, has a massive driver shortage it's still recovering from. And some of the proposals that were mitigating measures that were put into the environmental assessment were sort of impractical. Like, taxi drivers were acknowledged to be ones that would lose their jobs, just like with automated vehicles that we're all talking about now in the public forum. And they could reapply to be MTA bus drivers, which really is not going to work for them. First of all, there's a long list of people that want to be bus drivers, I'm sure, on a civil service list, and taxi drivers just don't operate that way. They don't have the right certifications. That's not something that interests them, and this would be something that would fall flat. The COVID-19 aftermath is very, very important. And I mention it because we still haven't fully recovered. Taxis and Ubers are even partnering together in New York City, which is kind of unbelievable, to deal with this driver shortage and the lack of permits that are out there. So this is really probably the wrong timing because we haven't fully recovered. You can look at the number of rides per month. They're still down as of now, but at the time of the report, by more than 54%. And things are getting a little bit better, but we're not there. It's not the right time to have a very, very big surcharge, if any, at this point. They've already played their part. They've helped the system. This is just a chart that shows you the average trips per day from 2020 to 2022. You can see that high volume apps and Ubers and Lyfts are back, but the taxi industry is still struggling. But still, Ubers and Lyfts are not back to where they were before. Price elasticity, the amount by which demand for a trip changes in response to a price change. The bigger the congestion pricing charge, it's almost like a fare increase, and it will lead to a diminution in ridership and hence in revenue to a struggling industry with drivers that can't afford to make ends meet as it is. Case number 5, low-income users. Of all the taxi trips that end in Manhattan, about 4.6% originate in low-income housing, tax credit, qualified census tract areas. Of all the Uber trips that end in Manhattan in its central business district below 96th Street, 15% or 160,000 trips originate in these areas. So people who have less economic means are going to be hurt adversely because they have no exemption per se to get into Manhattan when they need to, if they're going to a doctor's appointment or they're taking an elderly relative. And number 6, transit visit users. Similarly, geographical equity. 20% of Uber trips ending in Manhattan in the central business district originate from a point more than 0.5 miles away from a subway station. There are limited alternatives in certain parts of our city to even take public transit to grapple with the increased costs of taking your personal motor vehicle in. Yet again, a sustainable mode like taxis and for-hire vehicles, which are really part of the solution. Once they get in, it's better to have one of them taking you around if it's a necessary evil to have a car than to have a personal motor vehicle. 15% originate from a point more than 1 mile from a subway station, and up to 20% of those living in transit deserts are dependent on Uber as a mode of transportation. So our recommendations, don't double tax the taxis and the for-hire vehicles and the Ubers in New York City. The CBD tolling program should be paused and more studies conducted to address the economic impact on low-income drivers and also on passengers. This report, I want to thank our peer reviewers, Dr. Kamga, who is the head of our center, as well as the former Human Rights Commissioner for New York City, Pat Gatling. Pat also served as the Deputy Secretary for Civil Rights for the Governor of New York, and also a congestion pricing expert and economist, Jonathan Peters, who's a professor of data analytics and finance at College of Staten Island, which is the largest transportation desert in New York City, the entire island, which has very limited connectivity to public transit. Jonathan is an expert on environmental justice and as well as congestion pricing, and has been very outspoken on these topics over the years. So I want to thank these peer reviewers who helped with this report. And since the report, there's been a lot of activity. This summer, almost a year to the time this started, now with the FONSI being issued by Federal Highways, there have been some lawsuits and talk of more lawsuits. The first issue is the governor of New Jersey, who has not brought a dormant commerce clause case, but basically the typical NEPA claim, which basically says that in federal court, highways never should have issued the environmental FONSI. There should have been a complete study for many of the reasons I kind of alluded to and some more, including looking at all the impacts around the area in terms of how traffic patterns would change. They're arguing in court, whether they win or not, that there should be an environmental study done. If they win the case, congestion pricing could be paused for several years. Some of similar arguments are being made about Staten Island, that people who are commuting from Long Island or New Jersey, which are southeast and north of Staten Island, are going to be coming through their borough to avoid the toll. That case is expected to be filed in the next couple of weeks. So it'll remain to see what happens with the legal challenges. There's also a concern that drivers may bring a Title VI lawsuit, claiming that the FONSI, which took every single, it was a mitigating measure, and to their credit, they kind of listened to my report. Rather than charge vehicles that come in that are taxis or for-hire vehicles are charged for every single trip, they said you only have to be charged once. But the problem is they flipped it around from the passengers to the drivers to pay, which gives them probably standing to bring a civil rights, equal protection, Title VI case, saying that as low-income, disproportionately affected populations of an EJ population, that they are now paying for this burden when more affluent passengers in Manhattan don't have to pay. So it remains to be seen. The MTA has not made their final decisions on exemptions, the amounts that are going to be charged, or whether they could change this particular item, which they possibly might. They've alluded to it at one of the latest hearings that they did. But this is all going to play out in the next few months before the end of the year. The MTA is moving ahead with trying to implement these issues and the system. And unless there's a court order, I suspect that it will continue and plans will go into effect. So all eyes are on the courts for the next month or two as we exit August and go into September. And then, we'll see how the MTA makes its final decisions, trying to balance a lot of different competing interests and stakeholders and politics. It's no small feat. And, while congestion pricing is, in my view, one of the tools, of the many tools in fighting congestion, it's not the answer to all of them. And we need to be reasonable about things. And I think that our report highlights how you have to look at the equity impacts for passengers and drivers. And in particular, you need to make sure that it's a fine balancing act that doesn't have adverse implications on the mode or a submode that's trying to help and supplement mass transit. It's not an enemy to mass transit. It is a supplement. First and last mile connections, wheelchair access, mobility as a service. The future in terms of filling every nook and cranny of New York City outside and connected to the central business district comes from our industries. So let's hope that the Traffic Mobility Review Board listens to us, that the MTA listens to this research and guides it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's my research. If you need to reach me, I have lots of hats, as I mentioned. This is probably the best contact info to get me at. So thank you for your time, everybody. I'm very, very excited to listen to a lot of the other presenters at the conference, and I appreciate the opportunity to present this report once again. Have a great day.
Nasser, thank you for playing that. I guess, yes, so he had this, Matthew had his email address in the slide. So if you have any questions.
Oh. I can, share that email if you want.
Yeah, sure. You can post it in the chat.
Okay.
So anybody has a question can contact him directly. And that was perfect timing. We still have 3 minutes. So in the meantime, I think, Cham's already here, but if there are any questions related to any of the presentations or any comments, I'll be glad to hear them in the remaining 2 minutes. So maybe Lynette had a question for Wenjian earlier. So if maybe you can ask that. Is he still here?
I don't see him here.
Yeah, he seems to have disappeared. Yes. Okay, so never mind.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, well, anyways, thank you for joining this session. Nasser just posted Matthew's email address in the chat box, so if you have any questions, you can contact him there. And then I would like to pass the baton to Shams. She will host the next session. So, all good?
Thank you, Giancarlos, for helping to lead the session. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for presenting. And I think I'll see you guys some other time, maybe online, maybe in person. Okay, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Gian.
And Nasser,
Appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah,
sure.
Here, things will not
Thank
be.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for presenting and thank you for joining.
Hi, Shams. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi. Thank
Hi,
you. Now
how
I
are
can
you?
unmute and then share my video.
Okay,
That's great. How are you doing?
great. Thank you. So it's yours.
Thank you
Would
very
you
much.
like to share your screen? Because I think the first presenter is not available.
Yes, I can. So I can run the presentation and then share the recording from my computer. All right, I can do that.
Okay.
Yes,
If you
sure.
want,
Thank
I
you.
can do that either. It's
Oh, you
no
can.
problem.
If your computer system is much better, then please do it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
My computer is not
So-
behaving good for the last couple of days.
All right.
Yeah.
So let me just see.
We'll just wait for a couple of more minutes just to see if more people are joining, and then we'll kick off the session.
Yes, sure. Do you have my screen now?
Yes, I can see your screen. Yeah.
And just for checking, please let me know if you can hear the voice. Or...
Yeah, sure.
My name is Melrose.
Yes, it's all good.
All right.
I think you can go ahead. So I'll just start. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the last session for Eastern Track for Bridging Transport Research Conference. And as you know, this is a zero cost, zero travel conference. So we are really glad that you have contributed towards this conference to make it a successful event. And this is the first year that we are running this conference. And in today's session, it is about travel behavior and mode choice. I am Shamsun Nahar Yasmin. I am working at Queensland University of Technology, so I'll be chairing this session. In this session, we have 5 different presentations on mode choice, and then shopping behavior, and also some relevant travel behavior to COVID, and then other period. So we will be hearing those interesting talk. And our first presenter is Melrose Pan, but she just did let us know that because of the tornado in Tennessee, she will not be able to give the presentation live because the internet connection is not very good. And her presentation is on changing the mode choice through action, a framework for a small participation pool. And by the way, one more thing that I'd like to mention is that for this session, our Zoom coordinator is Nasser. Thank you very much for your help. So Nasser will be playing the pre-recorded presentation for Melrose. So let's begin. Thank you.
Okay, I just start the video and it's going on mute phase. So
Hello everyone, my name is Melrose. Today I want to present our study on mode choice dynamics. We conducted a field experiment using a small participation tool. So mode choice and demand management is the key theme of this paper. So mode choice depends on several factors such as social demographics, psychographics, and trip characteristics. Prediction mode choice is actually very important for demand management. For example, designing an incentive program. There are several key questions regarding how to design a good incentive program. For example, how much do people need in order to change their mode from driving to more sustainable modes of transportation? So this relates to a concept called willingness to accept. Usually, it relates to the monetary value people are willing to accept in order to change their behavior, for example, from certain mode to a more sustainable mode of transportation. And also, in order to develop a long-term incentive program, another question is, will people's willingness to accept increase or decrease over time? So this question is very important to develop a cost-effective incentive program or a general demand management program. So let me illustrate this concept in a little bit more details. So mode choice studies have been examined a lot in the literature. So usually factors such as demographics, trip characteristics like travel time, gas cost, and psychographics such as people's attitudes toward public transit or biking are the key predictors of mode choice. And this relationship is usually characterized by the traditional utility theory, where people make rational behavior based on these predictors. However, another type of study is about the dynamics of mode choice, which is about how the factors of the impact of these factors like trips or psychographics impact on mode choice change over time. For example, when people start to change their mode and have more familiarity with, for example, public transit or bicycle, will they more inclined to choose these modes over time, or they still are more likely to revert back to driving? So this is the type of question interested by this study. So in order to examine how their mode choice change over time, we conducted a repeated meta study. So basically, we asked participants to actually make a transit trip in this study, and we measure their attitude toward different modes of transportation before and after. So this study is called repeated meta study. So it involves multiple measures of the same variable taken on the same subjects. So there are 2 major benefits of the repeated meta study. The first, large sample size is not always necessary when measuring the same subject repeatedly under different circumstances, because we are able to collect more data points regarding each individual. And second, and also this leads to the second benefit is it enables significantly quicker hypothesis testing, because we don't have to spend a lot of time on collecting the samples. So in summary, we have two major hypotheses in the study. The first one is people's willingness to accept will change after one transit trip. So because of the budget of this project, we are not able to do a longitudinal study. So we only want to measure if their attitude, willingness to accept will change after one transit trip, after they actually make the trip. And the second hypothesis is the impact of the trip characteristics, like their walking time or waiting time on transit use motivation, will also change after one transit trip. So this is the study design. As I earlier mentioned, we asked the participants to actually make a transit trip, and we will let them to take a survey before and after this trip. So this is a 4-week study. So in week 1, we conduct a pre-transit survey. So basically, we want to measure their perceived experience about public transit and driving. So for public transit, most of them don't have much experience. So their experience is more about, it's more like their reviewed attitude. And also we ask their willingness to accept in order to transform from driving to bus. And also we asked one of their psychographics confirmation bias through a certain measure. And then we asked their individual characteristics, so basically their demographics such as gender, age, like which grade, and also we asked their mode use motivation based on a Likert scale, the 5-scale Likert scale. And week 2, we asked them to take the public transit. So actually in week 1, we asked them to think about a trip they usually make by driving from their home to whatever destination, which is about 2 miles from their home, and ask them to imagine this experience and give us those measures. So for example, perceived experience is about how far they think and how much travel time they think they will spend to for this trip, or by bus or by driving. And willing to accept is specifically about this trip. And then we asked them to actually make the trip as they indicated in the survey, and we collect their data about when they start their trip, when they arrive at a bus stop, and when they left the bus, and so on and so forth. And in week 3, usually this is after they finish the trip, we take another survey. So basically we measured exactly the same thing, but this is based on their actual experience about public transit. So we also, as I mentioned, I collect their bus experience, like the total travel time for walking or waiting at the bus stop, or actually in vehicle travel time. And then we also measured again their willingness to accept convert from driving to public transit. And we also measured their confirmation bias again after this trip and their use motivation. So in week 4, we did a follow-up survey to see if they actually make any additional transit trips after this experiment. So in terms of the sample size, because this is a small participation pool study, so we have to control several factors. The first one is we control the age. We only ask participants to between 18 and 30. And also they have to be the habitual drivers. So basically they drive most of their time everywhere basically. And also they use public transit rarely, but they probably kind of know like it is actually public transit is available near their home and their destination. And in terms of sample size, we set the effective size is 50% or 0.5. So basically it's the minimum expected difference. And also we set the significant level 0.15 and power is 0.8. So we used a software called G-Power to calculate the sample size, the minimum sample size, which is based on the t-test. And we want to test the statistical difference between the means of two dependent means between the matched pairs. So altogether, the total sample size here we need is 22. So in order to achieve the statistical significance, we collect 22 data points. So for the modeling framework, we used a model called seemingly unrelated regression. So basically, we want to compare the coefficients of these factors on willingness to use transit before and after the actual transit trip. So we assume that their error terms are correlated so that they can be compared on the same basis. And we know how these impact change over time. So the summary of the statistics, so we mainly collected the participants from the University of Arizona, and they all lived in the city of Tucson. So for gender, so around half of them are male, more than half of them are male, and another half of them are female, and their age are basically like university students, college students, which is 22. And we also asked about the region they lived in when they grow up and their trip purpose. So most of them, their trip purpose is commuting, and also some of them are like doing grocery shopping, and some of them are running errands. So in terms of the findings, we want to see whether they overestimate or underestimate travel time by comparing their perceived travel time for the trip and after they actually make the trip, their actual travel time for the transit trip. So we first compared the total walking time. So we found that participants tend to underestimate the actual walking time, especially when their time is over, the actual time is over 25 minutes. So they might feel like, oh, it probably only take 15 minutes, but actually they made 25 minutes. And also we found that people also tend to overestimate the actual in-vehicle travel time. So this means that they probably think it's going to take half an hour to arrive at their destination by bus, but actually in the bus, they probably only spend like 20 minutes or so. And we also found that people tend to have, so the willingness to accept in a decreased after a transit trip. So this means that our first hypothesis is valid, and specifically the average WTA, willingness to accept, before the trip was 18, and after trip was reduced to $11 a trip. So we also take a look at what factors can influence this reduced willingness to accept. So we also measured their perceived comfort level before and after the trip, and we found that an increased level of comfort, perceived level of comfort, can reduce their willingness to accept. So it means that after they actually take the trip, they may feel like, okay, it's actually quite comfortable to take a bus, and this actually make them feel like they don't need that much incentives to change the mode. So in terms of the impact factors about transit use motivation, we found that the impact of comfort becomes more positive after a transit trip. So this aligns with our analysis about willingness to accept. So it means that actually their perceived comfort actually play a more important role in their mode choice decision after they actually make the transit trip. And second, we found that the impact of walking time becomes significantly negative after a transit trip. So that I earlier mentioned, people tend to underestimate the walking time. So probably after they feel like it takes so long to get to the bus stop, people might feel a little bit frustrated so that they don't want to take a bus again. So this factor might upset people. And it's also worth noting that in Tucson, this study was conducted in summer 2022 in Tucson, Arizona. So the temperature is pretty high. So this factor might also influence people's motivation to use bus, as they have to walk to the transit stop and also wait there. So in conclusion, there are three major conclusions. So people might be upset by the longer than expected walking time. This is our finding. However, people's underestimation about walking time might also due to the Viardot effect. So basically, this is people's tendency to overestimate shorter intervals and underestimate longer interval. So because of this unexpected longer walking time, people might still unwilling to use public transit. So the second finding is people might need fewer incentives to switch modes when they realize the service level is actually better than anticipated. So maybe before they think actually it is super uncomfortable to use public transit, then maybe after the actual trip, they may feel like, okay, the air conditioner is pretty good and they don't have to wait very long in their car, and they can do something else on the bus since they don't have to drive themselves. They probably feel like, okay, this is some positive things about public transit which they didn't realize before. This may actually make them want to use public transit more. And the third finding is that people might focus more rationally on the quality of the service and less prone to their own biases. So this part we didn't really touch upon this study, but we also measure people's confirmation bias, and we found that they actually reduced this bias after a real transit trip. So it means that people might be able to make the decision more rationally rather than prone to their own biases when making the mode choice decision. So in terms of the policy implication, when designing a demand management program, especially mode choice in this case, policymakers should incentive more about their first behavior change, because people might very reluctant to make the first change at the very beginning. However, after the first change, some people might feel like, okay, it's not actually bad experience to take a bus, and thus they will make more transit trips. And because of increased ridership, public transit agencies might be able to enhance the service based on the user input, thus form a positive loop. And another type of people will still think public transit is bad, thus they will revert back to driving. So in terms of the marketing or promotion, actually more focus should be focused on people who actually are kind of motivated to use public transit or not hate public transit in general, and stimulate their behavior more. And for those who still want to drive, then maybe not much cost should be spent on them to promote them to public transit. So that's all. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please contact us if you are interested to learn more about this topic. Thank you.
Well, that's a very insightful and wonderful presentation. And as I mentioned, the presenters couldn't join because there are some interruptions in the internet because of the tornado that has happened a couple of days back. If any one of you have any question, please write that down in the chat box, and we will make sure that we forward that to the authors. And you can also write down your email address, and that way we can transfer the answer of the questions that you might have. So now, saying so, we'll be moving forward to our next presentation. And the next presentation for this session is on mode choice modeling of shopping trips, considering heterogeneity among individuals. And our presenter, the presenter is Dindigala Prem. Are you here, Dindigala? Are you available?
I cannot find her, and I think, yeah, we do not have any video in the.
Yeah, so I will just wait and then see if the presenter joined, then we will invite after we have the next session. So the next presentation is influencing factors analysis for oversized truck route choice problem using trajectory clustering and discrete choice model. And the presenter for this one is Yuma. And I think, yes, Yuma is present. Hi, would you mind to unmute yourself and then share your presentation with us, please?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Please, we can see your screen, so you can start. Thank you very much. And please introduce yourself. I don't have your bio, so I would appreciate if you introduce yourself and then talk about yourself also a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ma Yue from Kyoto University, Japan, and now I'm in ITS lab. a doctoral student, and my research topic is on the route choice problem of the oversized track, and we use discrete choice models to analyze the factors that impact on drivers' route choice. And today my title would be Oversized Track Route Choice Behavior Analysis using two models. One is binomial and another is recursive logic models. And now I begin my presentation. First, some background. So the use of oversized trucks for cargo transportation now is becoming very frequent, especially in Japan, from a statistics released by Ministry of Transport in Japan, that in like 2021, you can see from the right figure, nearly 87% of the cargo transportation was made by oversized trucks that with a max load of 6.5 tons or more. So, and another thing is oversized truck, it's very, very long, very large. So it's more likely to cause severe traffic congestion, traffic safety problem, and some environmental issues. And here is a news that in Japan, in a city in Japan, the large truck, when it turning right, it have come some collapse with the block. So if it's a very small or normal vehicle, it's not a big issue, or the accident is not that severe. But for oversized trucks, it's more easier to make such accidents, and the consequence would be much more severe. So its physical and operation characteristics differentiate them from ordinary normal vehicles in route choice, especially maybe they have potential preference for like wider, maybe wider roads, maybe less turning and some tools things. So this research, the objective of this research is to first to explore the impacts and the magnitude of road characteristics to the truck driver's choice. And second, to find a method to deal with choice set with infinite options, because if you choose the route from like A to B, because the network is so complex, so there might be infinite options you have. So we were also wondering whether oversized trucks have choice, because in most of the cities in the world, the government applied very strict management to trucks. Maybe only can use some of the roads, but in Japan, they have a system. So if a truck have ETC, the towing on their trucks, they have some free area. And like sorry, it's in Japanese, but it means you also need to apply for a cargo transportation from a spot to another, but you don't need to apply for a specific road. So you give the government your origin destination, they will give you a map, and that's all the road you can use. Then you can choose your routes from the network, and you can even change your routes during the trip. So yes, the truck drivers do have choice. And now we will use two models to do the research. The first is from the perspective of trips. And
Hi, we cannot hear you. Can you just check? Can you hear us? Okay, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
We cannot hear you properly. Hi. Okay, let me just write to him and then see. Well, technology can let you down anytime.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Should we proceed with another
Yes.
presentation?
We can hear you now. Would you mind to share your screen and then pick up from where you left? There you go. No, we cannot still hear you. Perhaps you can leave the meeting and join back and then see if that solves the problem. Right. By the time you might figure it out, I was just like wondering, do we have our next presenter? Because on the name pan, I cannot see anybody. If there is anybody from the next presentation, can you please just let me know that you're around for the presentation on identifying COVID-19, mode choice impacts via interaction analysis and with attitudinal variables? Is any of the presenters in the room, in the Zoom room here?
I believe that they are not available.
Yeah, okay. So Ma has joined us again. Let's give it a try. Hi, Yuma, would you mind to speak out and then we can try and see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. That's great.
I still don't know the reason, but I can always.
It can happen. It can
hear
happen.
you.
Yes.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. I start from the my data. Okay. The data we use is in Osaka in Japan, and also called the Central Kansai urban area, including Osaka and the nearby Kobe and Kyoto region. There, this area have a lot of cargo terminals and truck stations around this area, so it makes me more possible to discover the to get more trajectory data of the oversized trucks. And we also have some information about the road network. We also called it digital road map DRM data. So this is an overview of the network. And we also have some attributes for each road links. First is some base information like the geometry, shapes, and their IDs. We have their road type, length, width, and number of lanes, and some thing with the median barrier. The second type information is management. We know who is the administrator and whether it is a toll road, and some limit speed and the restriction things. Finally, we have some operation information, including traffic volume, average, and average travel speed of the link. And then we have the truck trip trajectory data from the ETC equipment that I mentioned before. And we have the data from 2020, from July to September. From September to November, we have more than 20,000 trucks to make more than 2 million trips. And one thing to be mentioned is that about 17% of the trucks is extra large vehicle. You can see the distribution of the number of trips and trip lengths. You can see that most of the trips were made in the weekdays, and the length of the trips from 0 kilometer to 120 kilometer, and some even longer. And all the data we got is map matched with the DRM link, the digital map, a digital road map data. Although we have 2 million trips, but not all the trips are useful, especially when we want to use binomial logit model. So for binomial logit model, we filter in some concentrated origin and destinations of the trip. We make sure that the trips for each OD pairs, there are at least 50 observations, 50 trips, and some restrictions on their length, and whether it is extra large vehicle trips, and some hour of day and highway percentage things. And at the end, we have 96 ODs and nearly 10,000 trips were selected. And then we want to cluster, because now for each OD there are so many routes, maybe more than 100. But for the logic model, it's impossible to deal with so many options. So we want to decrease the options. We use some clustering method. First, we resample all the trajectory to make sure that each trajectory have same number of points. And then we measure the distance based on the geometry, the spatial distance. Then we use some clustering method. What we use is the quick bundle, because it performs the best compared to the normal like k-means or dbScan method, and it can get the number of clustering automatically. So here is an example. We have like more than 160 trips, and then from the result we have 3 clusters. Each, like, this is the most frequently used. This is the shortest. Yes, it's not the most frequently used. The shortest was only used for 26 times, and this is the longest, only 2 trips. So for the binomial logic model, we established it with options as a root that is the mostly used, as in this figure, the most frequently used or not. So these are all the significant factors that in the model, and the plus minus means whether it is these factors is positively or negatively influence the driver's choice, and the absolute value means the magnitude of this. So we find that trucks prefer routes with fewer turnings or intersections, and they prefer routes with higher average speed, like this item. And truck seems to prefer roads with a higher number of lanes, fewer median barriers, and urban roads instead of highway. Maybe the reason is about the toll thing. So this is our first model. Although this binomial logic is easy, but it's still meaningful. From another side, we think it's not the best model for choice, for route choice, because in reality, drivers don't decide their routes from the beginning before the trip, but they maybe make step-by-step decision when they make the trip for at each intersection to decide whether go straight, turning left, and turning right, based on their information or some like traffic speed or the GPS navigation. So the idea is to use some dynamic programming things. This is a Markov reward process, MRP. It since people are making decision from each state to decide which is his next state based on the values he can get from each state changing. So the higher the value for the next state, the more positive the result that will be produced by that state, then the driver or the decision maker will is more likely to choose that state. So in our route choice problem, use the same MRP idea, but replace the state with links, road links, and replace the values with utilities. Then we can get such model, like the name of it is recursive logic model. It's recursive because it allows drivers to make decisions step by step. So people at each link, they will decide which link he will choose the next, and considering the utility of the next link. The utility consists from two items. The first is instantaneous utility related to the link itself, but also the downstream utility. It means if they choose the link, they have some downstream utility he cannot avoid. For example, if this is length, the drivers don't only consider the length of the next, but the next of the next and the next of the next of the next link. So this is the idea of the recursive logic, and the idea is good, but for our estimation, one problem is the network is large. We have more than like 1 billion links. So the parameter estimation would be so super slow. So the next step is we want to simplify our road network. Here is the method we simplify in road network. First, we choose all the trips we want. This example is all the trips from container terminals in Osaka. And in this figure, in the middle figure, all the red links is the trips used links at least once. And then we put buffer zone into the network, the yellow zone, and all the links within the buffer zone will be taken into consideration into our model establishment. And all the other out buffer links will be removed. So this is the method we simplifying our road network. And also for recursive logic, we established three types. We established models for 3 types of logistic facilities in Osaka area, container terminals, because the truck will be super large. Truck terminals means some normal truck, maybe not too big, but still big. And bounded area, the cargo would be some import or export freights. So we built not 3 models, but 6 models, because we established models for separately from those logistic facilities and to these logistic facilities. And this is from cargo terminal, container terminal to cargo terminal, from truck terminal to truck terminal, from bounded area and to bounded area. We want to see whether the factors influencing the route choices difference between different logistic facilities. And this is the result. And some interesting thing is, like, first for 2, we can find that trucks from these logistic facilities tend to choose 2 roads like highway, but for some trips for trips to, maybe they have already unloaded their freights, they choose not to use tow roads because it's too expensive. Another thing is like turning. Truck drivers always don't like turning, but in Japan, vehicles are driving on the left side, so the right turning means more waiting times and more distance to make the turning. So people don't like right turning, then left turning, and the U-turning is the most disliked one. We can also include a link attribute named link size. It means it can deal with the route choice overlapping things, so it will decrease the utility if a one link road link be used so many times, it will decrease the utility. It also solves the problem of IIA property in discrete choice model things. And the larger it is, it means the overlap of route is larger. So we think most of the trips overlaps a lot, except for the trips from truck terminals. So these are our findings. And finally, is our next step is now for our recursive logic model, we can only established for a very small area, like 10 kilometers times 10 kilometers. But if we want to increase the network scale, it will take a very long time to do the estimation. So now we are finding a way to solve such problem. And in our next step, we will select all the trips from Osaka area to Kyoto, and then use two like binomial logic model and recursive logic model for the same trips, because now the research use different data source. For two models, we want to use the same data in the future. So that's all about my presentation. Thank you very much, and I appreciate if you have any comments or questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone have any question for the presenter? If you have any question, please do write them down in the chat box. I cannot see any questions so far. I do have a couple of questions for you, but just like pretty much, to have a little bit of better understanding. So in my understanding, the trajectory data just is relevant to the trip information, origin and destination, but it doesn't have any information relevant to the loading factor, right? Or like the commodity type. Am I right in assuming that? Because this is trajectory data, so it's rather, the location specific.
Yes. Okay. Now the trajectory data is only the road they used.
Yes. So do you think, would there be any, if the commodity data from the locations, for the specific locations of your interest comes available to other data sources, would it be possible to impose that on your trajectory data? And then do you think it will add value to your model in general to understand, how much products are being delivered from one location to another?
Yes, thank you for your comments. Yes, I think your comments is very important, because now the factors in our model, we do have a lot of factors in our model, but it's not all the potential factors that can influence drivers' choice on route choice. And as you mentioned, yes, some like, for example, land use factors can also be introduced into such recursive logic model. And sadly, we do not have now, but for the next step, we are also considering to introduce more factors from from Google Map, the POI things, and from some 3D city data, like we can get the height of the buildings, and yes, we can introduce more factors into our models next.
Yeah, because like specifically for freight vehicle, there is always like, you know, predefined route. And actually, in fact, Jeremy has a very relevant question to that. So I'll read out the question and then you can answer that. All right. So Jeremy's asking, to what extent is this a realistic decision scenario? Do truck drivers not pre-decide trip routes or follow GPS, that is, you know, Google Maps? Would you mind to give an answer for that?
Yes. Sorry. So from the beginning of our research, we decided to use binomial logic model because it's the most easiest tools to do such analysis. And then we find that we also tried to learn some truck drivers' decision when they make the route choice. Yes, even if they have Google Maps navigation, they still can change their route during their trip, not only based on Google Maps, because especially at the end or starting of their trips, they have to find the specific origin or destination by themselves instead of Google Maps. And also for some reason, if there is some restrictions or some crowded road things, they have to decide it by themselves instead of only take Google Maps for reference. Yes, they do have their own choice on route choice.
All right, that's really very interesting view. But for very large truck, isn't it always predefined within a origin and destination? So for example, a medium-sized truck or a small truck perhaps can reroute their way to go to a destination. But is it the same provision in Japan that, you know, if it's a very large truck, then they have to stick to the route that is predefined for them? So is the norm is different in Japan than, like, let's say in some of the Western countries?
Yes. In Japan, they have a special, especially in Osaka, they have a special system for the truck drivers because they don't predefine their route before the trips. They applied to the government that they want to go from their origin to the destination. Then the government, the manager, will give them a map that these are all the roads that you can use for your trip.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that's really good to know. And another question I'll read out from Jeremy. How large are the estimated impacts? It would be useful to present in odds ratios or as a probability difference. So in your calculation, did you consider what is the estimation impacts? What is the elasticity, marginal effect, or probability differences?
Okay. Now I'm also reading the questions. What about? If you look at this. Yes, we considered cost related because you can see from this page, this slide, we have two factors to reflect the cost. First is road length, and the second is toll. So this is the two main parts of the. I think the cost of the oversized truck trips. And for trip time and duration, Yes, we also wanted to introduce trip time and duration, but it's highly correlated.
I think we have lost your sound again. Can you hear us? Hello? All right, we will try to move on to the next presentation, and if your mic is back and the sound is good, at the end of all the presentations, we'll have some time for Q&A, and at that point, we can explain all the questions, Q&A that we might have. Now, do we have any presenters from the next presentation, which is identifying COVID-19 mode choice impacts via interaction analysis with attitudinal variables? Does any of the presenter around? No, I cannot see any of them. Then we'll move forward to the next presentation. I can see Annesha. And the next presentation is on exploring online shopping behavior in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And the presenter is Annesha Enam. Annesha, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but just give me 2 minutes because I was not prepared to present now. Just give 2 minutes so that I can get my
sure. Please take your time. So in the meantime, Yuma is back. Can you unmute and then try to speak out for us to see if we can hear you? Or you can answer this question in the chat box if you don't mind. By the time Annesha is prepared with her presentation, I can give a little bit of insights on the trajectory data and then the freight sector data. In my opinion, the trajectory data is very important because in any country, anywhere in the world, developed country, developing countries, or low-income countries, getting freight data, any sort, is very, I would say it's extraordinarily difficult. And trajectory data has some limitations because often we don't know about the commodity flow or the loading factor, which is highly relevant to the freight sector. Because if we are running an empty vehicle, and if it's a large vehicle, then it's not at all economical, and it has a greater impact on the roadway system, environmental impact, and many other different things. But on top of that, the commodity flow, just to know the logistics of it is very important to understand, well, what kind of products are being transported by which mode. And that's why commodity flow becomes very important. But as I said, in the freight sector, it often becomes very difficult. In the United States, there are some data. For example, in Australia, the country where I am, it is almost impossible to get any commodity flow data. One of the databases that we had is from 2014. And after that, it has never been updated because of the different kind of proprietary rewrite. It becomes very difficult to get access to that kind of data. And in my understanding, at the national or at the state level, it doesn't exist. So that's why we don't exactly know from which location to which location the products are being transported and what kind of products are being transported. And one of the biggest impact of that unknown factor affected during the COVID-19 period. For several products in Australia, we are dependent on export fundamentally. And that impacted the supply chain so much that the demand for some of the products went, it was just like skyrocketed, which made things very difficult. And so that's why it's not just, the decision of today's decision just to know, well, from where to where the products are going, but at the same time to understand the overall demand so that the supply chain during any uncertain situation can be mitigated effectively. So that's why freight data is so important. But the challenges that we do have around freight data, that's not going away anytime soon. And it's very nice to see that, well, the researchers have started to explore every possible options that are out there. And the idea of using trajectory data, at least to understand the flow, either loaded vehicle or unloaded vehicle, I think that's gonna become quite popular over the time if we don't have commodity flow data readily available anytime soon. So that's my understanding about the need of the data. We cannot do anything without data, but at the same time, it's also important to understand that, well, if we just get a data, that's not good enough, that has to be validated. And it's good to see that the trajectory data and some sort of validation is coming up across different countries, to be honest. And also in Australia, we are trying to do that. So it's good to see that those kind of research is becoming surfaced over the time. It's very good to see that. Well, Annesha, whenever you are ready, just let us know and we can start.
Yeah, I think I can start sharing as well.
That's great. So please share your screen. And also, I'm not introducing you much detail, but it would be really great if you talk about your bio and your background a little bit. It would be really great. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, sure. I hope you can see my screen. Do you?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, so yeah, basically I completed my PhD in 2017 from University of Connecticut. After that, I've been I was in the US. I was working as a researcher at Argonne National Laboratory for a couple of years. After that, currently I've been working as an assistant professor at Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. Yeah, and also I share the same undergrad school with Shamsul Nehar Yasmin. Yeah. With that short bio, I think I can get started. Let me see if I can start the presentation mode. Okay, so just let me know if you can't hear me for any reason or if my network connection is not great. So this is a work that we have conducted in Dhaka. Dhaka is the capital of Bangladesh. If you are not knowledgeable about the location of the country, it's actually located in South Asia. This is a work that I have conducted with a couple of my undergrad students, but they have graduated and they are unfortunately no more interested in presenting the research. So I'm here to present the work. So I'll start with a little bit of background, then I will present the data that we have worked with. Then I'll move on to the methods and results. There we will be basically we will try to answer 3 basic questions. Who are engaging in online shopping behavior, online shopping in Dhaka? What products are they buying and at what frequency? And the people who are engaging in online shopping, whether that's impacting their physical shopping engagement frequency. And then I will conclude with a summary of the results. Just to give you a background, actually in Bangladesh, the number of people who engage in online shopping is very low. Only 3% of the population are engaging in online shopping. This is quite low compared to the Western world, for example, Europe or North America. However, in 2020, due to the COVID-19, the online shopping increased by 70%. And it has been projected that the business to e-commerce business to customer e-commerce will be doubled between 2021 and 2026. And also it's estimated that 50% of the online shoppers are currently residing in the capital of the country. So that's what motivated us to conduct this research, because we don't have a very good idea about who are these people who are currently engaging in online shopping, and even if they're engaging in online shopping, whether that's impacting their physical shopping engagement. So if you're not familiar with the traffic situation in Dhaka, Dhaka is a highly built up area. The traffic condition is at an extremely poor condition in this country. And the average travel speed is around 7 km per hour. So if we can move some people to the online shopping, it can either be a bane or a boon depending on how we
manage the e-commerce delivery and so on and so forth. So this research doesn't solve all these issues or doesn't comment on all these factors, but it's a preliminary study to understand who are these people that started to engage in online shopping and whether that's impacting their physical shopping engagement. So as I mentioned, we are trying to answer basically 3 basic questions. We are trying to identify the heterogeneity among the online shoppers. Then we are trying to identify the products they are buying and at what frequency they are buying those products and whether that's impacting their physical shopping engagement behavior. So while answering these questions, we were also interested in answering which hypothesis. We know that there are a couple of hypotheses that influence the online shopping participation whenever the online shopping starts to become popular in a region. One is the innovation diffusion hypothesis, which states that the people who have access to the technology, so the people who are living in the urban area, they will be the first participator of online shopping. There's another hypothesis which states that if the people who are living in the suburbs or who are living far away from the central business districts, who don't have a very good access to the business brick and mortar type of shopping places, those people might be the first group of people to start participating in online shopping. So we also wanted to see which hypothesis holds, if any, or if both of the hypotheses hold true for Dhaka. Next, moving on to the data for this research, we obviously had to collect primary data because we didn't have any data in hand which we can employ to answer these 3 questions. So we conducted a survey in November and December of 2021. Some of the COVID-19 related policies, lockdown policies, were still in place, so we couldn't conduct our survey in person. That's why we had to rely on the online platforms for conducting the survey. And we restricted the survey for the people who were above 16 years old, because we thought that these are the people who will be making their decisions themselves. Anybody less than 16 years old will be, influenced by their parents to make decisions. So we developed a structured questionnaire, like any other travel survey questionnaire. It had several sections in it. So the first section was the socio-demographic section, where we wanted to understand the status of the individual as well as the demographic status of the household where the individual is living. So these are the typical questions that we usually ask people. Their age, gender, household structure, meaning the number of people that are residing in the household, the number of whether they had any kids living with them, the household income, vehicle ownership, education level, employment, and the current profession if they're employed. Then for the travel behavior, we didn't go into the details of the travel behavior. Rather, we just wanted to understand their weekly travel pattern. So how frequently they are traveling on a monthly basis, what is their most frequent trip purpose, and what kind of mode they use for their most frequent trip purpose. So we're just trying to get an idea about how frequently those people get out of their home. In general, not particularly for shopping, but in general. Then we had 2 sections on physical shopping behavior and online shopping behavior. So for physical shopping, we wanted to understand how frequently they engage in physical shopping, and what are the typical locations, or what are the type of shops they do their the regular shopping. Then we had an online shopping section where we asked them whether they engage in online shopping. First of all, if they do, then what type of products. So we listed the types of products and we asked them to give us the frequency for engaging in online shopping for those particular type of products. Additionally, we had a section to capture their attitudes towards online shopping. I'll talk about this section in a minute, but basically we came up with certain statements to get at their attitudes, the general attitude toward online shopping, and we asked them to rate their agreement to those statements on a scale varying from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And finally, we had a section on internet access or internet connectivity. So whether they had 24/7 internet access, what type of internet mode they use to get connected to the internet, and how much time they spend regularly on internet if they do have access to the internet. So just to give you a basic idea about the data that we collected. So in terms of the gender distribution, around 60% of the respondents were males and rest of them were females. The respondents were very young. 95% of the respondents belong to the 16 to 35 years age group. And in terms of household income, around 25% of the respondents didn't want to give us any information about their household income. And 25% of the respondents say that their household income were more than 50,000 Bangladeshi Taka per month, which is around $500 per month. And for the rest of the lower income categories, we had around 10% samples in each of the lower income categories. Since we saw that the people who participated in the survey were very young, so 80% of the people were actually held some kind of a student status. Not necessarily all of them were full-time students, but they were studying in some capacity, 80% of the sample. In terms of employment status, since 80% of the people held some kind of a student status, only 20% of the people were working full-time. So in terms of the attitudinal questions, so these are the, these are the type of statements we used to get at the attitudes towards the online shopping. So, and we asked them to rate these statements on a scale varying from strongly disagree to strongly agree. You will notice that for some of these statements, they were mostly agreeing to those statements. Most of the samples were towards the, towards the strongly agree region. For example, the fact that they don't have to go out to get the products if they do the online shopping, and they have the, they can check multiple stores at the same time within a very short period of time if they are doing online shopping. And it's some people find it easier to find the products online. For these statements, they were agreeing to those statements mostly. However, when it comes to the quality of the product or the price of the product or the trust on the online retailers, we did notice that the people were mostly agreeing to those statements. Rather, they were mostly towards the disagree or the neutral zone. So this is just to show that we got some variation in the responses to the statements. It's not that all the people were giving the responses to all the statements either towards right or towards left. So with that, I'll move on to the methods and results section. So I'll try to answer the first question, basically the heterogeneity among the online shoppers. So in this case, as I mentioned, we asked the people whether they were engaging in online shopping or not. And the response to this question is what we use as the dependent variable to identify the heterogeneity among the online shoppers. So 80% of the sample say that they were engaging in some kind of online shopping, and around 20% of the sample were not engaging in any kind of online shopping at that time in late 2021. And we fit a very simple binary logic model where we all of us know that we have to come up with two utility functions, basically one for the people who are engaging in online shopping and one for the people who are not engaging in online shopping. And since we had to keep one of the utility as the baseline, we basically parameterize the utility for the people who are engaging in online shopping. And the hypothesis was we will parameterize it in terms of the demography, their general travel behavior, as well as their internet behavior. However, contrary to the the hypothesis, we didn't find any statistically significant impact of internet behavior on the online shopping participation. I'll just identify some of the findings that we think are interesting, or those I will be highlighting in the previous in the latter segments as well. So one of the influence was the gender. So the females were found to be more enthusiastic participator of online shopping compared to the males. Contrary to our hypothesis, we figured that the people who actually have car, they are engaging in online shopping more than the people who don't have access to car. Similarly, contrary to our hypothesis, the people who are employed and who are going out at least three times a week, they are actually engaging in online shopping more than the people who are going out less frequently. So this actually, because the survey was conducted in the capital city of Dhaka, basically what is happening is probably the people who are employed, who have access to car, they actually know better about the online shopping opportunities. So that's why probably these people are engaging in more in online shopping. So we believe that this is basically the innovation diffusion hypothesis is at play for the capital of Dhaka, at least for the car users and the employed cohort. So with that, I'll move on to the next question that we wanted to answer: what products they are buying and at what frequency. So we figured that the most popular products to buy online for the people in Dhaka are the foods and drinks and the clothes, shoes, and cosmetics. The next most popular group of products were grocery, reading and job materials, and electronic and technological gadgets. And third most popular products were medicine and specialty goods. However, we noticed that though some products are more popular, it's not necessarily that the people are buying those products more frequently. For example, clothes, shoes, and cosmetics are the more popular products, and medicine is the least popular product. However, whenever people are buying medicine, they're buying it more frequently than the clothes, shoes, and cosmetics. So we wanted to do some multivariate analysis with this data as well. However, due to the data limitation, we had very few number of observations in each of these categories. So that's why we couldn't identify the heterogeneity in these responses. I'll move on to the final question that we wanted to answer, which is the impact of online shopping engagement on the physical shopping participation. So in this case, the dependent variable was basically we asked people, do you think your physical shopping engagement has changed after you started participating in online shopping? And people responded to this question on a 5-point scale that varied from the physical shopping decreased substantially to increased substantially. And we figured that the people who responded that the physical shopping increased somewhat or substantially, this group actually accounted to less than 10% of the sample. So that's why we moved forward with this part of the sample. We wanted to delve further into who are these people for whom the physical shopping decreased substantially compared to the people for whom the physical shopping actually remained at the same level. So this is a categorical response. So that's why in order to identify the heterogeneity in this data, we wanted to fit an ordered logit model. So we all know that an ordered logit model, basically the responses are categorical, but we assume that there's a latent propensity which is guiding these responses. So we parameterize, or basically we come up with a function of this latent propensity, and this latent propensity guide us to the response that we observe in the survey. And we connect the latent propensity with the responses with some threshold parameters. So in a typical application of the ordered logit model, these threshold parameters are basically estimated as constants. So in this application, the hypothesis that we started with is that the threshold parameters will be a function of the attitude towards the online shopping. So basically, we had these 3 levels of physical shopping, the change in the physical shopping frequency, decreased substantially, decreased somewhat, and then maintained at the same level. So that's why we had these 2 threshold parameters, and we wanted to parameterize these 2 thresholds in terms of the attitude towards online shopping. And obviously for the latent variable that is guiding these responses, we parameterized that with in terms of other demographic variables, the household characteristics, their income, vehicle ownership, and those kind of information that we gathered from the survey. So since we wanted to come up with the attitude towards the online shopping from the statements that we used during the survey, we wanted to do some, first of all, we did some exploratory factor analysis. So from the exploratory factor analysis, we identified that we can capture the attitude towards online shopping from these 8 indicator variables using 3 latent variables. So these are the 3 latent variables. One was related to the time and travel. As I mentioned, that these are the variables that was capturing the fact that the online shopping doesn't take as much time as the physical shopping takes. It gives us more opportunity to check out more stores within a short period of time. Those kind of things were captured within this latent variable. The second latent was basically capturing people's attitude towards the price, quality, and trust on the online shoppers. And then the final latent variable was capturing the fact that there are more variety on the online shopping, or more or less variety depending on the attitude of the people, and it's more easy to find products online rather than in the physical shopping. So once we identify these three latents, then we moved on to an integrated choice and latent variable model where we estimated the, the factors as well as the parameters together. So this is, I'm showing you the result of the exogenous, the estimates of the exogenous variables that we used to parameterize the latent propensity that was guiding the ordinal responses. So if you remember, the female were the people who were engaging in online shopping more than their male counterparts. And we also figured that whenever female participates in online shopping, it's more likely that they will reduce their physical shopping frequency more drastically compared to maintaining it at the same level. However, we figured that in terms for the households who have children in their household, even if they engage in online shopping, they are not likely to reduce their physical shopping frequency drastically. In terms of income effect, we figured that for the households who are belonging to the low income category, that is for the households whose monthly household income is less than 30,000 Bangladeshi Taka per month, which is around $300 per month. If they engage in online shopping, it's more likely that they will be reducing their physical shopping frequency drastically rather than maintaining it at the same level. Okay. After that, this is where I'm showing you the effect of the attitudes on the threshold parameters. So obviously, we had the two constants for the two thresholds. After that, I also wanted to estimate the effect of the attitudes on the two threshold parameters. However, we couldn't find any significant impact of attitudes on this threshold parameter. We only figured some significant influence of the attitude towards online shopping on this threshold parameter. And since the parameter estimates were positive, basically a positive attitude or a favorable attitude towards online shopping was moving this threshold parameter towards right, which means that it's increasing the probability of belonging to this group. And this group indicates a group where the physical shopping frequency is decreasing substantially. So in order to decrease your physical shopping frequency substantially, while engaging in online shopping, you have to have a favorable attitude towards online shopping. That's what we figured from this analysis. So just to summarize the responses, we figured that for the car owners, for the people who are car owners and for the people who are employed, they're engaging in online shopping more than the people who are not car owners. So this, as I mentioned, this indicates that probably these are the group of people who have better access to the technology that is needed to engage in online shopping, and maybe these are the group of people who know better about the online shopping opportunities than the people who don't have access to car or who are not employed or who are less privileged people of the capital. On the other hand, we figured that the females, they are engaging in online shopping more, and whenever they're engaging in online shopping, they are not just engaging in online shopping for the sake of engaging in online shopping. They are also they are more likely to reduce their physical shopping engagement propensity. So I think there's an opportunity to attract the females to engage in online shopping because many of you, maybe you're not familiar with the safety and security situation in the country. The females are very often reluctant to travel without company at nights or without cars because the safety and security situation is not that great in the capital. So probably that's why whenever they engage in online shopping, they do that so that they don't have to go out and engage in physical shopping. So here we see the play of the other hypothesis, which is the efficiency hypothesis. If people don't have access to the brick and mortar shopping, probably here the problem is not the access, but probably they feel more secure to engage in online shopping. That's why whenever they are engaging in online shopping, they reduce their physical shopping engagement frequency. And also finally, we saw that in order for the physical shopping frequency to drop drastically while engaging in online shopping, the consumers have to have a favorable attitude towards online shopping, and that the people with a favorable attitude towards online shopping, they are more likely to reduce their physical shopping engagement. So with that, I'll stop here. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer those questions if there's time, or otherwise you can send the questions to this email address as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annesha, for your insightful presentation. We do have a question on the chat box, so I'll read it out. The question is from Jean Payne, and the question is, compared to the previous studies, what is the main contribution?
I think the first contribution I'll say is this is probably the first study to see the impact of online shopping on the physical shopping frequency in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I mean, there have been few studies which have been conducted by the people who are basically working in the business, those areas where they are trying to see whether people are engaging in online shopping and who are these people that are engaging in online shopping. However, whether that impacts the physical shopping frequency, that has not been conducted to the best of my knowledge. And if I compare it with the other, I know that there are very many studies. Basically, we found very many studies from the China, and there we saw that there is a very significant impact of the internet access. So that's why we started with this hypothesis that the internet access will play a major role in Dhaka as well. But we figured that in capital Dhaka, probably actually there are multiple issues I have to talk about here. One is that the fact that we conducted the study online, so basically these people had access to the at least some access to the internet. So probably that's why we didn't find a significant impact of internet access in our study, but that is something that we figured that was not there in the studies from the China, that they in almost all the studies they found very significant impact of internet access. Only the people who had very good access to the internet, they were the people who were engaging in online shopping. That's something that we couldn't validate in at least in this study, and there's obviously there more scope to conduct more studies and try to check whether this hypothesis holds true. If we conduct the study for other parts of the country, as well as if we conduct the study for Dhaka again with the in-person questionnaire rather than online surveys.
That's wonderful. Does anyone have any other question for Annesha? All right, I do have a couple of questions, but before I ask the question, I would like to say that thank you for mentioning that we went to the same undergrad school, and I was thinking, I graduated in 2007, and before that, we didn't have much understanding about the research. So after graduation, we thought, yeah, we need to do higher studies, and then I didn't have any idea about research, not much idea, because of the exposure also, because at that time, we didn't have that much information, not that much exposure to internet, the limited information. So just from the idea, well, we need to go for higher studies, we started to apply. But I was always interested in econometric and discrete choice model. So when I went for my master's, I was looking at the equation y equal to beta x plus epsilon, and it took me 2 to 3 months just to understand why such a beautiful linear equation became such a complex probability density function. And well, that's what I kept on thinking at least for 1.5 years till when I went for my PhD. So I think you guys are doing a wonderful job because you are giving direct exposure to undergrad communities, to have that flavor of critical thinking, and then the idea of the research. I think that is making them one step ahead of where we are during our undergrad stage. So that's really appreciable, and it's amazing to see that it's happening, and it also helps them to think critically more, right? So
yeah, I was at the same place. I was at the same place when I graduated. I graduated just 1 year after you, so I was at the same page. I had no clue about all these econometrics and discrete choice models. So yeah, and nowadays, because of, as you mentioned, because of the internet and all these things, our undergrads are also very, they are keen to do better and start research earlier than later. So that also helps to some extent. That also pushes us to, engage them in this kind of research early on.
Yeah. Yes, so that's really amazing, and I really do appreciate that it's happening, at the very root level. But at the same time, exposure and then the idea of having to have the critical thinking and the deep thinking about the research, and that's where you are coming into the scenario, and you are doing that for your undergrad students. It's amazing to see that. I'm sure I also have a lot to learn from you about handling undergrad students. All right, so one of the questions that I want to ask, given that I also have an idea about the Dhaka and the complexity that we do have, it's highly populated, it's such a dense area, and at the same time, on one hand, we do have the demand for online delivery, but on the other hand, we have that complexity of the people who are delivering the services.
Exactly.
In this survey, you are focusing on the online delivery, which is amazing. But in future, given the context of such a complex city background, do you think you are going to also look into the other end of it, the people who are delivering and then who are supplying and actually trying to provide with these kind of services in Dhaka?
An excellent question, actually. And actually, when I started to think about this study, it was definitely, a second part, or a part that we're thinking and wanted to conduct. But as you mentioned, the fact is, this is the user side. It's easier to survey the user side because it's kind of a household interview survey. So we know where the people are living and whom to ask and how to ask questions. The problem is the other side, the delivery side. We have to motivate the business users to some extent to get information about the delivery frequency, the kind of modes they're using, and the kind of people they are engaging in, or at the more grassroots level, the people, the food panda kind of delivery, where the people are coming to our house with the bicycles or the motorcycles. It actually much more difficult to sample, but obviously I think about it, and I'm at a place where I can't do the survey design, help with the survey design, but I have to be able to engage people who will be willing to do the hard work of going there and doing the survey. So that is something that we are thinking about, but yeah, I think there are much more challenges because we have to motivate the business owners to some extent to give us some data, in our country, because of the safety and security situation. I don't blame the business users. Safety and security situation, even the very rudimentary information that won't, create any harm to them if they divulge those information to us. Even after that, they'll be very cautious about giving or sharing those information with us. So we face those issues where as part of this undergrad thesis, basically, we wanted to conduct a supplementary survey just to get a very basic idea. We were not thinking about conducting any model or anything like that, just to get a very basic idea about the frequency, the kind of warehouse or the location of the warehouse they're using for this, Daraj or those kind of online platform. But the business owners were not very willing. Maybe we'll have to, use some other means where we have some contacts, or we know the person and we can motivate them in some way.
Yes, because I think like the online delivery, as you said, you have to know the demand side to design anything relevant to the business side, right? So the demand side, it's very good to see, the kind of products that there is demand for the online delivery. And as you mentioned, it will solve some of the problems in terms of congestion because of the in-person shopping demand. It's incredible the amount of the in-person shopping sometimes happens during the holiday period or like the festivity time. So if some of these can be reduced, it would be great. But for a developing country like my home country, Bangladesh, it's always very important also think about the economic implications of that. I always think that this kind of job opportunities actually is gonna contribute towards economy, because we do have so many population, but the job opportunity is very less. So the research that we are doing, it's amazing. Hopefully it will inform some of those policies, and then we'll be able to make some significant difference in that specific sector. We have another question from Fuad Huda. I will read it out. Thank you, Dr. Annesha, for your wonderful presentation. I'd like to know whether you collect any data from your survey respondents that whether the products they were buying can be found in a physical shop or store, to understand whether online shopping is actually reducing physical shopping. Because a lot of micro business in Bangladesh are now completely online based, rather having a physical store. So that's why people are susceptible to online shopping.
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. No, to answer your question, short in a just a sentence, we didn't do that. The assumption was that those people, assumption was that since we were not asking people whether we're engaging in online shopping for the personal reason only, it was we were trying to get at the household demand of the online and physical shopping. So the assumption we started with was that there will always be some demand for the physical shopping, but some portion of that need can be met by the online shopping. But this is a very good question that I haven't thought about at that time. There can be some of the products, especially for the young generation, there can be some products which can only be which is much easier to buy online, and it can be much more difficult to get physically. So probably that's why people are engaging in online shopping. Because of the responses of the product distribution that I got and that I showed you, since people are also getting the groceries, the medicines, the job materials, and all kind of products from the online, and they are engaging in physical shopping in a frequency which seems relevant to us when we ask them about the physical shopping frequency. So I don't think that these are the people who are engaging in online shopping just for the products that are not available physically. But that's a very good question, and whenever we extend our work in terms of conducting in-person survey, we're thinking of doing that. We will definitely think about it and include that question specifically, that you are buying this product online is because it's not available physically. I don't know if I understood your question correctly or not.
There is another follow-up question from Fuad. It's relevant to COVID-19. So his question is also, has there been conducted or any plan to follow-up survey after the COVID, as the primary data was collected during COVID, so people might be forced to online shopping at that time?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. That can be a future research endeavor where this can be used, two sources of data coming from two times. One thing is that in this survey also, we asked people before COVID-19 at what frequency they were engaging in online shopping, and now at what frequency they are engaging in online shopping. So we have an understanding, and it doesn't seem like it was only the COVID related, because in Bangladesh, it's a developing country, and in late 2021, there were policies in place, but many people started to go out and many businesses were open. So the online shopping that we saw at that time, it was not, obviously the COVID-19 has instigated the overall development of online shopping popularity in Bangladesh. There's no doubt about that. But they were not forced to do the online shopping because of the COVID. Not all of the people or most of the people. However, definitely, if we do a follow-up survey, obviously it will be a panel data, and it will be a very interesting study to see whether the online shopping engagement frequency has changed from the late 2021. Yeah, that's a very good suggestion.
Yes, that's wonderful. So one of the points that Fuad mentioned, actually, that's a very good point, is about the micro businesses. That's also a very important source for economy back in Bangladesh at home. And I think the balance is gonna be somehow, it will be rebalanced, but we don't know which way it's gonna go. And I think the worldwide, other than North America had online shopping already popular, I would say, before COVID-19. But even in Australia, online shopping became quite popular during the COVID-19 period. And some of that is actually staying back, especially the grocery store, online for the delivery of the groceries and the small product of the small payload deliveries, that is staying back in Australia to a certain extent. And that is impacting the physical stores. There have been some announcement about the local businesses to close down because of the impact of the online shopping staying back. So we don't know exactly where it's going to go, but we can try and make sure that the trade-off actually happens towards the improvement of the economy. So that's my 2 cents. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, the presenters, for your wonderful and insightful presentations. We learned a lot today. And I would like to also thank Nasser for holding the ship to go in the right direction and then help us with the technology and the Zoom. And does anyone have any other question relevant to this session or any other session that you might have joined for this BTR 5 conference? All right. Hopefully, we will have more submission from all of you during our next year round of conference. The plan is to run this conference every year. And I can see, I mean, like, because of this platform, I get to see Annesha after a while now, even though it's online. And I get to learn about some of the research that are happening all around the world without even moving. As you can see, I'm sitting in my office. So it's much more convenient, and you can learn about the research and the way transport research is moving forward, just from either from the comfort of your home or the comfort of your office. So I think it's a very wonderful platform to bring us all together and then learn about our research. So thank you very much for joining and sharing your research and the outcomes from your students, from yourself, and then from your lab. It's very wonderful to see that. I'd like to thank you all, and hope to see you all in next year. Until then, if you have any question, please drop me a line. I'll be more than happy to answer. If you have any other question for any of the presenters, please let us know, and we will forward the message accordingly. Have a lovely day, and thank you very much. Thank you, Nasser.
Thank you, Shams, for your coordination and supervision and your efforts.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.